Okay, let's call to order the City Council special meeting of April 23rd. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Armstrong.
Here.
Councilmember Rubio. Here. Councilmember Burrows.
Here.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Roll call, please. You just did that. Let's move on. Let's move on. What's next?
Item 2, Workshop 2.1, review of the fiscal year 2024-25 preliminary budget and budget balancing strategies. Staff report by Kelly Sessions, Administrative Services Director.
Mayor, if I may, before as Kelly gets up there to set up the budget balancing strategies. As you are aware, in our proposed budget versus our revenues for the city, staff has worked extremely hard over the last few weeks to try and identify strategies before you this evening to balance that shortfall. So tonight or this afternoon, followed by each department. Kelly will have a wrap up, followed by an exercise where, depending on direction from the council this evening, we have identified some funding that could be used to restore items, and we'll go through that exercise with the council as to what you would like to see restored in this preliminary budget. Again, this is our first run at the budget. We still have a few more meetings with the council to fully adopt the budget, which we're anticipating will happen in the first meeting in June. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly Sessions to begin the presentation.
And before you do, Kelly, anyone that may want to speak to this item, please fill out a card in the back and give it to Christina up front here, and we'll call on you as soon as he's finished with the presentation. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here today. I wish we were bringing forth better news to you, but we as a team are positive that we can find a solution to this issue, and we'll work through it. So with that, let's talk about what the presentation is about. And I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can. There's quite a few slides, and we have a lot of discussion with the department heads. So this presentation is intended to help us review the development of the 24-25 operating budget. We will look at the historical budget trends, review departmental goals for 24-25, and we are on track to adopt a budget in June. In terms of the agenda, we will first look at the budget development process. Afterwards, we'll talk about status of the 24-25 budget. We will discuss unfunded capital improvement projects, look at our past historical budget trends, review departmental major action plans for the upcoming year, and then close with next steps. So 24-25 overview. After COVID, we will say that most revenues are recovered, and we are assumed that this is the new normal. This is what we're going to be facing going forward, starting with 24-25. Our property taxes are projected to increase 4.7% in 24-25. That happens to be the second lowest in the county. Sales tax growth, our second largest revenue generator, projected at 3.4% for next fiscal year and 3.2% in 25-26. So both are growing, although not in huge amounts. Our transient occupancy tax is projected to increase 4.5% in 24-25. But still, it's $1 million less than what it was pre-COVID. So bottom line is our revenue growth is not sufficient to keep up with the increase in expenditures, and it will require significant service delivery reductions, which we'll be talking about this afternoon. In terms of goals, going into the budget, we had some goals that we wanted to achieve as we were developing the budget. First, maintain existing general fund reserve levels going forward at the 36%. Live within our current resources. seek new and increased sources of revenue. We also wanted to wean ourselves from all these one-time solutions that we have used in the past, such as use of reserves or delaying equipment replacement. And then finally, avoid additional deferred maintenance and preserve funding for the infrastructure maintenance fund if that were possible. How did we do on that, or how did we achieve those goals? Well, number one, we had to reduce departmental budgets by up to 10%. We defunded vacant positions effective immediately. We executed a user fee study and implemented the appropriate rate increases. We will see that again tonight on the regular city council agenda. We worked to manage our inflationary increases, utility costs, salary and benefit costs, and maintenance contracts. And also we made a goal or a strategy to return to core service delivery and reduce service levels in the areas of lowest priority. So only do those things that were of highest priority, I should say. So what are the things that we learned? Key takeaways. Expenditures continue to outpace revenue growth. Maintaining existing service levels over an extended period of time is not financially sustainable. Our labor expenses are increasing. We have unmet staffing needs, which are becoming problematic. Many of our CIP projects remain unfunded, and projections for all of these metrics we just on this list, they're going from being questionable or debatable to definitive. These are happening. So in terms of the budget process, we began the budget process in December. We opened up our financial system to departments. We had a council retreat and goal setting session on February the 3rd. Throughout up to mid-February, departments formalized their budget requests, and all those were in the system by mid-February. In early March, the city manager met with or reviewed the department requests, and at that point, we identified the $14.1 million deficit. March and April, departments went back to revisit their previous budget requests and began the budget cut process, beginning with tier 1 cuts up to tier 2 cuts. March 26, we conducted the 5-year financial forecast. And then here we are today, April 23rd, with our first budget study session. And we can always schedule additional sessions if necessary. We will come back to you on May the 28th to review the proposed budget and a 5-year capital improvement program budget. And then we are slated to adopt on June the 11th. So budget development in terms of general fund revenues. Our general fund revenue projection for the year is $65.3 million. That's $2.3 million or 3.7% above what our mid-year projections are for the current fiscal year, and also $4.6 million or 8% above last year's actuals. So growth of about 4% per year. The city has recovered from COVID-19 revenue losses, but as I said earlier, TOT is still down $1 million from a pre-pandemic high of $3.3 million. So here's what the revenue breakdown looks like on each revenue source. Property tax still is our highest revenue source at 26.5 and sales tax at 13.3. That goes right down the list. Total of 65.3 projection for next fiscal year. And there you can also see the 22-23 actuals and the mid-year projections, which we just discussed. On the expenditure side, the department requests are $70 million. That's $10.8 million or 18% above the current mid-year projections, current fiscal year mid-year projections, and also $18.2 million or 35% above last year's actuals. This just highlights this idea that there's years of pent-up demand and that we are in a structural deficit. This is clear. The expenditures on a department basis, you can see they break down here. Police Services is our largest general fund user at 22.1, Public Works at 19.8, and Parks and Community Services are at 10.1. As it should be, those are the three main areas that the city provides service to the community. That totals $70 million. The difference between revenues received or revenues projected and expenditures projected. Expenditures are outpace revenues by 4.7 million. And then net transfers in and out of the general fund are a net transfer out of 8 million. That adds to the expenditure side. And so that gets us to a $12.6 million deficit. And we'll talk about this in a minute, break it down a little bit further. So this slide here, you'll see down there, increase, decrease in fund balance about halfway through this table. There's that $12.6 million number again. The mid-year appropriations we did for the current fiscal year of 1.5 million also adds to the expenditure side. That 12.6 plus the 1.5 equals the deficit of 14.1 million.
That 1.5, I guess I misunderstood that. I thought those were expenditures in the current fiscal year. How come they show up in the following fiscal year? Explain that if you would, please.
They are expenditures in the current fiscal year. But as we draw, because we have the general fund reserve policy, as you draw down on the 1.5 million, that also reduces our reserve amount. So we have to account for that $1.5 million drawdown from somewhere, because that carries forward into the next fiscal year.
Okay.
So here's those numbers broke down graphically. You can see on the left side of this graph, fiscal year 21 actuals and fiscal year 22 actuals, fiscal year 23 actuals. In each of those, clearly revenues are coming in higher than expenditures. That's because we've already made all of the adjustments in the budget, use of reserves and use of other funding sources to pay for the expenditures. And we lived within our budget as since that was the authorized amount. But then going forward, 24 mid-year estimate and the fiscal year 25 department request next year, you'll see the difference between 110.8 and 98.2. That's the 12.6 million budget differential. So let's talk a little bit about how what the 14.1 million, where it came from. As we said, general fund revenues are coming in versus expenditures going out, $4.6 million shortfall on the revenue side. There is a net loss of 8 million in general fund transfers in versus general fund transfers out. And as you all know, the general fund backfills or subsidizes other funds. So when those funds, either by agreement or if they run short, the general fund backfills and draws down on fund balance. Fiscal year 23-24 mid-year adjustments of 1.5 million. So that 4.6, the 8.0, the 1.5 total, the $14.1 million deficit. Let's break down the 14.1 a little bit further. On the revenue and expenditure shortfall, you'll see the red arrow on the left pointing down. Revenues were up 5%, a total of 3.5 million. Expenditures are up 11%, a total of 7.5 million. 2.3 million of that expenditure is attributable to the retiree medical expense that was taken from the fund, the trust fund, And then this year, that expense is returning back to the general fund. And then other net transfers in and out of 600,000. That is where the $4.6 million shortfall comes from. On the right side, general fund transfers out. You'll see Doherty Valley Fund at 6.1 million going out from the general fund. And then also at this point, we left the infrastructure maintenance fund intact at 1.5 million as a contribution from the general fund. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then also miscellaneous funds going out of 400,000. So $8 million total there in that on the transfers out. General fund transfers in, this just breaks it down a little bit more clearly. Let's look at transfers out. 6.1 million is Doherty Valley Fund, 1.5 is Infrastructure Maintenance Fund, as I said. 1.6 million is going to debt service and 0.6 million to other funds as needed for 9.8 million out. So net transfer is $8 million out.
So is that 6.1 with the Doherty Valley Fund, is that total 6.1, which is negative, that we got reimbursed from the county?
Correct. So it's a shortfall of 6.1 that the general fund has to backfill to make that fund whole.
Typically, we used to observe around $1.5 million. This is surprising. 6.1 million is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So did you hear that? It had been at 2 million for the last several years, but it's been going up.
So then this year it jumped to 6.1? 0.4. Thank you.
Kelly, maybe just for the benefit of everybody here, maybe just a quick explanation as to what that Doherty Valley Fund is.
Okay.
And how, how we are reimbursed for services in Doherty Valley and that sort of thing, please.
Sure. So when Doherty Valley was annexed into the city, there was a settlement agreement with several different agencies, including the county, that required that the Doherty Valley area be accounted for separately. So they have their own separate fund to pay for services, which includes police services and parks services and streets, all of that sort of a thing. It's only because of this agreement that we account for those two funds separately. If it were not for the agreement, then the Doherty Valley Fund would be part of the general fund, because it's just another area of the city receiving services like other areas of the city receive services. So another way to look at it is you could say general fund, Doherty Valley Fund, kind of one in the same, $6.1 million shortfall, plus the other shortfalls that would add into that.
But I think the difference being that the county collects it, we need to
Oh,
bill
yeah.
the county in order to get reimbursed for services. And that's where the shortfall is we're not getting fully reimbursed for the cost of the services out in Doherty Valley.
Yeah, so per the agreement, revenues come into the county. The city keeps very careful track of all the expenditures that we spend on Doherty Valley. At the end of the year, we take all of those expenses, sum them up, send them off to the county. The county verifies that, yes, these are legitimate expenses. And then they take the revenue that they have received from Doherty Valley, take an administrative fee off the top of that, and then send the remainder to us. And that's where the shortfall is.
So this is net 6.1 million shortfall. So we are not going to get reimbursement on any of this money.
Yeah, that's the
So-
net on the CSA M129.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah,
See
the
it?
county service area M129,
Yeah, M29.
M29, excuse me.
And how we work with the county in that case, because from 3.5, we jumped to 6.1 million. This 100% increase, right? So when we go back to the county, how we are going to ask them for reimbursement? Do we use the same the numbers that we are getting expensed, or how that works?
Well, the county is collecting revenue based upon a fixed calculation. So if we are spending more money, they're not going to, just kind of out of generosity say, oh, sorry, here you go. They're going to return to us what is basically calculated to be our portion based on this settlement agreement.
But do they take into account inflationary costs going up? Have they done that?
Yeah, that's built in to the agreement. But and my understanding, my understanding is that early on in the agreement, this agreement dates back to the 90s, I think.
92, 93.
94.
In the early years of the agreement, the city was actually coming out ahead. We were spending less on service up there than we were taking in. So we were the beneficiary at that point. This is 25 years later, almost 30 years later, and now the county is the beneficiary.
Not really. They aren't really a beneficiary. They skim off a little administrative fee, but they're supposed to return 100% minus the administrative fee of the CSA revenue collected on the property tax.
Yeah, I say beneficiary in the sense that if they were still paying, if Doherty Valley were not annexed in, then they would be the ones that would be paying the extra for services.
Yes.
And also, to build on this discussion, we could probably do a special workshop just on the history of Doherty Valley and the various settlement agreements. Part of the issue with our shortfall in revenue for, specific to Doherty Valley, part of that settlement agreement includes that we receive. So in general, let me back up. For the city as a whole, we receive about 10 cents on the dollar for property taxes. Out in Doherty Valley, as a result of that settlement agreement, we receive about 4 cents on the dollar for the property tax. The other 6 cents goes to the county. The CSA M29 was created recognizing that shortfall, and in the early days, it made up for that shortfall. But due to various reasons, the inflation, the economic downturn, when developers stopped building homes in Doherty Valley or slowed down, yet all the infrastructure was being put in place. We took that infrastructure a little bit earlier due to the agreement than expected. So we were maintaining items before the Doherty Valley projected building occurred. So it's this, inflation, the economic downturn that has led to this shortfall. Basically, what the CSA M29 doesn't make up for, we transfer into the Doherty Valley Fund to make the services whole out there. So that gap in the Doherty Valley Fund, it shows you that gap between the CSA and the property taxes each year growing due to inflationary and other factors that are occurring out there. Doherty Valley is now fully built out. And I believe we've accepted it all. There might be a few portions that we haven't accepted, but we are now maintaining the vast majority of Doherty Valley, and we're starting to see the results of some of those costs coming in.
There was also projected to have a larger sales tax generators in Doherty Valley, which would have made up some of that gap. And that never really happened. If you drive around the Safeway Center, you'll find that there's, dentist office and banks and places that don't generate any sales tax.
That's another explanation for the CSA M29. It was not only the 4 cents on the dollar that we received making up for that, but also I've heard a general recognition that there was not enough retail space included to support that area. That's why they created the CSA M29 to make up for that shortfall. And that, I believe, is it goes up every year based on the CPI. I'll have to look into it, but last time I checked, it was CPI without a cap.
Okay, Thanks.
Okay.
That shows that it is going to continuously grow. This deficit is continuously going to grow. That's how it looks.
As
Okay.
long as we provide that level of service. I mean, if we change the level of service, now the agreement says that Dougherty Valley gets the same level of service as the rest of the city. So if we reduce the level of service, the rest of the city, in theory, you could reduce the level of service in Dougherty Valley.
In that case, yeah.
Know whether we want to do that, but that's kind of part of the agreement.
Ellen Ashridar.
There we go.
Mhm.
Where's Phil alone when we need him?
So this
sorry.
next table is interesting. If you look at the second line, total deficit balanced, you'll see the last 5 fiscal years, how each fiscal year started with a deficit. 2021, the deficit was 7.8 million. We had to close 21-22 is 5.9 million. In 22-23, it was 7.5. In 23-24, 7.9. And in 24-25, it ballooned to 14.1. Each of those lines underneath the deficit balanced is the way in which we filled the gap. So in fiscal year 24-25, the way we closed the $14.1 million gap was to use 1.6 million from the PARS Trust, that's the pension fund.
Which, by the way, is sitting at 1.8, but
Yes, it is. And reduced departmental budget citywide tiers 1 and 2, that was another 8.1 million. Add to that, unfunding all the vacant positions, that added up to 2.6 million. Transfer labor expense from the general fund to the general plan fund 201, that saved 300,000. And then increasing the user fee revenue, that again, we'll discuss tonight at the 7 PM meeting, that added 1.5 million to further reduce the deficit. The table underneath that, so you see the budget gap, there's those numbers again, the deficit that had to be filled. And the second line shows all of the uses of one-time funds or one-time resources that we used in order to close that gap. So in 21-22, of the $7.8 million deficit, we used 7.2 million in one-time resources. 21-22, the entire gap was closed with one-time resources. And that includes, I should mention, the ARPA funding that we received during COVID. In fiscal year 22-23, 6.3 million of the 7.5, 23-24, 5.7 of the 7.9. And then 24-25, we're trying to get away from continuing to use these one-time sources at 1.6. So you see that there has been this long-term deficit that we have been facing every year for the last 5 years. This is a quick review of where we need to be if we want to preserve the general fund reserve policy at 36%. Right now, with the $14.1 million deficit, we would be short by $16.2 million. And so our projected ending reserves at the end of next fiscal year would be 6.5 million.
that doesn't take into account the use of one-time PARS account, though. You still have 14.1 and we would use a one-time 1.6.
Yeah, it's still, it's,
Yes, it's still a big number, but it doesn't take into account the use of available one-time that we know we have.
yeah,
That was actually, we set up that PARS account for the purpose of paying retirement bill. That's why that PARS account is there. So
yes,
I don't consider that a horrible use of a one-time, but it does emphasize your point of using one-times.
yeah. And there are other one-times that are still available. If the council chose to do that, we could still go back to one-time funding.
Mm-hmm.
With PARS and OPEB and IMF and the general fund reserve. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about infrastructure maintenance fund. The current proposal includes, as I said, leaving intact the $1.5 million transfer from the general fund to the IMF. One option that we will put before you is to reduce that funding to $700,000 to address critical needs only. And then that would free up another $800,000 to be used to go back into funding other programs that we can discuss towards the end. So you'll see there, the 24-25, those are all of the requested amounts. And then the second column shows the revised request from 1.489 to $708,000. And then, of course, it leaves some of the projects deferred until the following year. Preliminary analysis of this idea, 500, if we only contributed 500,000 from the general fund into the IMF, the fund would go negative by year 3. If we contribute the full 700,000 of, if we contribute 700,000 of the 1.5 million, the fund remains positive through all 5 years of the CIP budget. If we do it, it does not account for any unforeseen work that may come up. And other CIP projects that have limited funding would not be able to rely on the IMF fund for additional funding. And there'll be further analysis completed with the CIP budget process. So this is still something that we can talk about later as well.
That acronym, I keep thinking of the Impossible Mission Force, and I wish they were here.
I think of
Where's Tom Cruise when we need him?
the International Monetary Fund. but-
Well, there's,
Yeah,
you're an accountant.
IMF, we need IMF bailout.
Okay. And then we also have the Doherty Valley CSA Fund, CIP project budget, same thing. Public Works went through the process of reviewing everything that had to be funded, and by lowering the funding amount for Doherty Valley CSA, it could relieve some pressure and burden on the general fund. So the original request for 24-25 was 1.498 million, and the revised request is just under $1 million at 980,000.
You go back to that, I'm sorry.
Yes. Again, those projects that are showing unfunded in 24-25, that would be deferred until the following fiscal year. So in the past, we have always maintained a conservative budget balancing strategy. And this is standard, typical means of budgeting. Slightly understate your revenues, slightly overstate your expenditures. At year end, you've created a fund balance if you manage your budget well. And in this way, you can, over time, generate sizable reserves, which is exactly what the city has been doing for years. What has changed? We are budgeting more in the margins. We are taking more risk in our revenue projections, and we're eating away at our expenditure cushions and reserves, such that the revenue rates are lagging, leading to undercharging for services. Again, we're going to address that tonight. And service requirements are increasing, but we are not increasing staff at the same time, at the same rate, I should say.
And especially we hit with this inflation, right? So the big inflation that's going on, the bills that we.
Right,
That is also-
everything post-COVID, the inflation kind of went through the roof. We still go to the grocery store and we see things cost a lot more. That certainly is the case with labor expense, which continues to increase, as well as what I mentioned earlier, expenses that had been charged off to reserve funds, returning back to the general fund. And so it kind of hits doubly hard.
Well, one curious thing is when you're in City Hall, you're grateful that the price of gas has gone up because we get sales tax which is a percentage of the cost of gas. Of course, when you're outside the building, you go, damn, the price of gas just went up. So kind of depends on where you're sitting, but
Yeah.
our gas tax revenue is likely to go up a small amount with the increased price of gasoline.
And also, if I may add, speaking about it, inflation and some of the city costs, we're breaking down our costs. We're looking at it in ways that is easier to explain the impact of inflation. One of the items that we currently pulled as a discussion point, the city spends about 8 million a year on utilities alone. That's water, electricity, probably a few sewer connections here or there. But when you hear of rates going up for electricity or water, think about that 10% hitting an $8 million bill. Two other items that I also would like to point out. One, at mid-year, we had one of our insurance premiums go up by $800,000 for our general liability for the city. $800,000 increase. And we can expect industry-wide, the insurance premiums are going up around 20% per year. So next year alone, our insurance premiums are adding $1 million to our costs. Another, county animal control services went up by $300,000 in 1 year. We are now paying $1 million a year for our animal control services. So when we talk about inflation and rising costs, it's not one item that we can point to. It's the inflation by 1,000 cuts, for lack of a better term. It's just everything and anything seems to be going up, in addition to labor and benefits. And the labor market right now it's quite frankly, it's hard to attract quality people anywhere in government service. And we are not, by any stretch of the data that you would like to look at, we're not the top paying city in terms of our salary and our benefits. So it's just the multiple factors. When we talk inflation, it's not just one item, it's many different items.
Yeah, just one PG&E itself is enough. Like, I think PG&E like 21%.
Yeah, something along those lines. And yes, we are looking at our contracts. We do have specific contracts for our LED lighting and other items that we're still paying off, I believe. But staff is looking at that.
I know, because I sit on the rate setting committee for MCE, that the cost for the power portion of your PG&E bill is made up of multiple parts. One of them is transmission distribution and a few things like that. But the cost of the power itself for MCE will not be going up this year. I sit on that committee and we've chosen not to raise the rate for the next year.
And you'll see later on in the presentation, we do have a slide that shows some of the utility increases. So that'll be.
There's a
brought
way
light.
to get more of our load onto the MCE side that would help us going forward.
Okay, thank you. Here is a recap of our reserve balance. I would say let's really just focus on the bottom line. All the way back to fiscal year 18-19, we had very healthy reserves at almost 54%. And then over time, you see, as we get up into fiscal year 22-23, still 48%. Mid-year projection for this year, 36%. If we do nothing and we just fill the $14.1 million deficit with general fund reserves, then we would be at 10.3%
I would
and
like to point out
$16.2 million short.
that I know in the FY22 and FY23, our budget, the approved budget would have been much closer to the 36%, but because of our wise staff, we end the year with a surplus on our revenues versus expenditures, which gives us an end of year reserve that's higher than the 36%. So the fact that it's higher at the end of the year, and we really don't know what it's going to be at the end of year 23-24, we believe it's gonna be 36.3, but
Yeah, we're budgeted at 36.3.
that's right.
Yeah, but
Experience tells us that, we understate our revenues a little bit, we overstate our expenses a little bit, so we should expect some fund balance coming back to the reserves.
Yes.
But is it like because our general fund overall increased, is that makes the difference in the percentage?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Let's say, for example, what was our general fund in 18-19?
In
So
terms
if-
of the amount, the size of
Yeah.
the general fund?
Yeah, if it is a smaller one, then definitely 53.8 looks big here as a percentage, but overall the number is smaller. So
Yeah, true, but
Yeah.
it would also be proportional because the 36% is always proportional to the size of the general fund.
yeah, but our revenues didn't grow.
Yeah,
So
over time,
that's a problem.
okay? We're getting close to the end of this part of it, so just a quick look at our SERB Trust Fund, that is our retiree medical fund, OPEB, we also call it. As of March 31st, we have a balance of 36.6 million. Next year, we will spend 1.9 million, so that will take the fund balance down to 34.7 million. And at 34.7 million, at the end of the year, we would be in a funded status of 84%. So, funding is still available there to pay for the $1.9 million retiree medical expense if we wanted to draw down, but clearly that would lower the funded status, and that has been a priority of the council in the past to maintain that. With that, that's the end of the initial presentation, and we can begin with the departments doing their major action plans. So I will turn.
So does this guy jump off the cliff or not?
It depends on what you decide to do after tonight.
All right.
Or Scott is going to push him.
Yeah.
With that, we'll hand it over to
Everybody
Deputy
ran
City
away.
Manager Cole.
Good afternoon. I will kick us off on the department
Kick
specific,
the guy off, huh?
Okay, let him go.
start us on our walk through department budget cuts. General government, of course, represents city manager's office, city council, city attorney, city clerk. And in 24-25, this upcoming fiscal year, will also represent human resources and risk management. And of course, Street Smarts, which is a separate fund, not general fund. So not really part of this conversation. So to get us started, of course, we want to talk about what's coming in the next year. You all know, you were there. We did the retreat in February where we reviewed these goals. Nothing has changed in terms of city council goals. So those remain in effect for this next fiscal year. In terms of the city manager's division, is what I'm calling it. We are using this current budget environment to focus on fundamentals. We want to move toward a modern city, and to do that, it doesn't matter the budget picture. We can always be making some progress toward that goal. In 2025, a focus on core delivery will mean that we connect with businesses and economic development. A key goal, of course, being to further the council's direction and really make and foster that connection between the business community. We intend to analyze how we are doing communications currently, and then explore opportunities for us to enhance both internal and external communications. And then, of course, right around July, August, we will be concluding the revenue measure, revenue enhancement project that you all know we've been working on for about a year. In terms of our city attorney's office, it's essentially status quo in terms of service delivery. You all know and appreciate the services that are being provided by that division. But in this next fiscal year, an area of particular importance is looking at the collaboration now with human resources and risk management, and how we can enhance our claims management by facilitating a stronger, a more kind of day-to-day partnership between those two divisions. And in the city clerk's office, there's a lot of excitement happening behind the scenes with a lot of records management. The goal is to look at how we do process, how we are currently processing information, our records, and actually leveraging our current software like Laserfiche. It's a robust software program that we already pay for, and that will allow us to digitize records, look at some of our processes that are currently paper, and actually digitize that as well, like our evaluations process, how we currently route and review contracts. So even in a very low budget environment, there's opportunity for us to enhance the way that we provide our core services. And then last, but certainly not least, with human resources now joining general government in 24-25, it represents an opportunity for us to look at those places of overlap where the Venn diagram will overlap with other divisions in our department, like the city attorney's office, like the city clerk's office. So we are looking at our evaluations process, how we can essentially create some efficiencies there through workflow, and using current systems that we pay for to keep that going. So you'll see in the service budget, that's ultimately how we pay for some of these services that we already provide through those software. And certainly an important element in this budgetary landscape is to focus on staff engagement and recognition, retention, and that will, of course, fall primarily on the shoulders of our human resources staff. They take that task very seriously, and it represents an opportunity this year for us to really get clear about how we engage with our staff on a day-to-day basis and keep them doing the good work that they're doing. Here's just a quick snapshot of our budget. Really not a surprise. It's people-centered. It's the work we do. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that our personnel costs are 73% currently, and you sort of see, your way down. 23% are service contracts. Development represents 3%. That development is a single word to summarize what is meetings, conferences for the council and for staff in general government, meetings that we have regionally, any trainings that we have. It's one single bucket to represent that. Capital represents replacement costs for things. And then, of course, revenues offset. We have a modest cost recovery in some of the fees that we collect. I'll go through the cuts here in a minute, but the updated allocation after the cuts that you will see, it shifts the expenditure, or our budget profile considerably, where 78% of our budget then becomes people, and the rest is sort of sand filling in the gaps. Services, of course, being the other key, not surprising element in our budget. One last thing I should point out, of course, the exercise that we are in was cutting our budget by 10%. You can see that we have accomplished that. It represents about $600,000 in cuts, which is what you see here. We broke it up into two tiers. The first tier is 5%. Second tier is attacking on an additional 5%. You see the breakdown there based on the division, with the end goal being about $600,000, which we accomplished in a series of ways. That specifically is what you see here. We did some, taking personnel, of course, off the table for a minute. We are looking at all the other buckets. So to draw some sort of clarity around what was being cut from our budget, we took some pretty significant cuts to services, about $281,000. That represented about a 20% cut. We did freeze one position in the city attorney's office. It's important to note, anytime you are freezing staff, it means that the work that would be distributed among more people is, of course, being redistributed among fewer people. So that means our contracting process will slow down in 24-25. That's a natural consequence of freezing a position. But that did represent about $150,000 netting savings. And then supplies, of course, that's how we run meetings, the stuff we buy during a given year. We cut by about 35%, which represented $82,000. And last being development and training, we tried to preserve that as much as possible. It was a 55% reduction, representing about $80,000. In that last bucket, of course, it's regional meetings, it's conferences for council, for staff, it's networking in the region. So one challenge that we know will come in the next year is building those networks that are outside an expenditure. So basically saving some money while trying to maintain those networks to help answer the questions and challenges that we face kind of in real time. So here's a breakdown of some of those. I will not go through all of them, but you can see some things that are notable that you will immediately recall. The facilitation that we did this year for the council retreat, I know it was well received. We appreciated having that as well. That has been cut. We had a follow-on meeting that helped the leadership team in the city get clear about council goals and strategies. And in implementing those council goals, we had an outside facilitator, same group from Baker Tilly. We have cut that in 24-25. Of course, all the conferences, like I mentioned, all the training, as well as a lot of the support that goes kind of behind the scenes, economic development. There was some money to help support data analysis, some software that has been cut. So it's really going to be people power for economic development in 24-25. And also some other sort of elements that are important to note. How we communicate, it's costly, right? So what we produce now in newsletters, we'll be transitioning from a quarterly newsletter. If of course it's in front of the council, if you so choose, we would transition from a quarterly newsletter to an annual report. All of those are challenging cuts based on our expenditure profile.
So is it possible while we are doing that, is it possible for us to explore the technology options rather than using mailers? Can we do like digital?
Yeah, and that's
all this.
actually what this does represent, is leveraging social media, leveraging our website, our email distribution lists. It'll all be digital, but as you know, not everybody receives their information from our website, although we would strongly encourage everybody to sign up for our weekly newsletter. Our challenge, of course, is that not everybody gets it in the same way. So, but when something costs a considerable amount of money, in the case of our quarterly, it's about $30,000, north of $30,000 a year. And then when we have, obligations like insurance, that are going up, we don't have an alternative there. And although it was reported at 20%, actually my experience in that market is in about 30%, and sometimes even north of that, depending on the type of insurance. So one thing we see coming, you'll see here in a minute, is we anticipate that insurance will actually be going north of what we budgeted. But before I go too far ahead, is there anything else on the cuts that you'd like to explore?
I just want to make sure that the medium we are changing in this case, rather than newsletters and spending money, but let's make sure that we do provide in some or other medium where we don't have to spend that kind of money.
Absolutely.
The quarterly newsletter in going forward up to the election in November, I think it would be imprudent to eliminate the ones, because I think that will be part of our education program going forward. Now, we can't advocate for a measure, but we can present, and that was what we were been using the newsletter for. So it may be you cut the second half of the year out, or we see what happens with the revenue measure. But that's one I would recommend that we retain. And I'd like to know what the cost is of the Government 101 before I cut it.
I can definitely get you that specific breakdown.
Citizen engagement on a very personal level, pays huge dividends. And you don't get the same kind of interaction with read the email, delete.
And one of the things I think that might be positive, I think I agree with Councilmember Perkins. I would be a little concerned about making a very sharp, just sort of clean cut at this juncture because for that reason. But I also think it's a great way to also transition people in that direction. Because there, obviously positive sides to that is it's more environmentally friendly. It's more accessible for people who have disabilities of some or have language barriers. So I think we'll actually reach new people if we really sort of build it out a certain way.
Problem is, any one method, using only one method to connect with people is not effective.
Mhm.
You have some people that like to get their things electronically, some people read the mail, and it kind of depends on how many ways do you want to communicate, if you want to get the message out. So,
It certainly does afford us an opportunity to look at if we add something, we can look at other ways, other areas where we might need to cut out, right? It's a zero-sum game. So we will take that and look at what it would mean with the bottom line. So this element, this slide rather, I think it's important for us to, focus on what it means for us going forward, right? Obviously not an ideal situation, but in any environment like this budget landscape that we're in, it affords us an opportunity to focus on the fundamentals. And those fundamentals mean that we can modernize our processes. It means that we can look at ways to be more efficient. Can look at ways that maybe require us, the sort of urgency can require some innovation. So that's what we're sort of focused on at this point. In communications, we want to develop a cohesive strategy for internal and external communications, clearly looking at what we talked about in an election year. We'll consider that. In the clerk, as I mentioned earlier, we're very excited about leveraging our software to improve our processing of information. In economic development, we are already looking at ways to do greater outreach and connect the city to our local environment, local economy. In HR, this is kind of a new horizon for general government, but it represents an opportunity for us to really lean into our cost structures around risk management, actively managing claims, and looking at those insurance premiums and sort of what opportunities we have there to kind of move the dials. Because we know what that landscape is. I know from personal experience, insurance is just expensive in California. And so there's no real likelihood where it's just 20% based on our historical average, which is what we budgeted. It's actually in a 30 to 40% landscape. So we know that those costs are likely coming at mid-year. So we just want to make sure we prepare council for yet another increase to insurance. And in terms of HR specifically, the excitement that we have over being inside general government is that we can now use our collective wisdom in the clerk's office and the city attorney's office to bolster our program. So that's what we are excited about. In terms of what we know we need going forward, Assistant City Attorney has been there for some time. It's also important to note from last year's budget, the one that we are currently in, we had reduced training and development monies, and we're doing it yet again. So in this new landscape, we're sitting at about 1%. So there isn't much left, not much meat on the bone there. So we've taken it down where we can. It's really important to know that we preserved staffing and personnel, and that trade-off is the operating costs. So, but not all doom and gloom. We are very pleased with the opportunity that we have to actually look at the way we do business now and improve where we can and use this year to focus on those fundamentals. And with that, I will hand it over to admin services.
One quick one, not to digress from the topic, but can we get a presentation in future on economic development focus on local business engagement?
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Okay. Admin services. As you know, admin services is comprised of finance division and also the IT division. I won't go through all of these bullet points as to what we do, but it's typical finance related items and IT related items. One thing I will say on the expenses for admin services, it is almost entirely labor related. There are no vacancies in admin services, so we couldn't offer up any positions as a cost savings measure. By the same token, the other large expense would be on the IT side and some of our contracts and software systems. So we made a strategic decision that we did not want to reduce using any kind of software applications that would lower our productivity even further, and also could potentially compromise network security. And we all know what's happening with other agencies out there. So we didn't want to cut any of that. On the department revenue side, we're looking at a $72,000 in revenue coming in through admin services. On the expenditure side, 5.2 million, and that's an increase of 447,000 or 9.4%. 8% increase in personnel expense with no new FTE. Contracts account for 12%, 84% of which is what I was just talking about, the enhanced network security. And we're looking to cut some materials and supplies costs, less pencils and paper to use and paper clips, and just really scraping the edges here. And other services are increasing by 11%, 6,000 in education and training, 5,000 meeting and other expenses are increasing by 6,000, education and training by 5, and meeting and conferences by $625.
Do we still pay for Zoom?
We do. It's on a much more limited basis now. Rick was here earlier. No, nobody's here now, but it's very limited now. Just we use Zoom for these meetings, and that's about it. Everything else we have transitioned to Microsoft Teams. So when we are holding meetings virtually with our staff or remotely, we use Microsoft Teams. It's part of Microsoft 365, so it doesn't cost us anything additional.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Reductions carried over from last year, professional network engineering services for contingency needs. This was amount that was cut last year of 20,000, and also $75,000 in network penetration solution. That is also was cut last year and carried forward into this current fiscal year. Future budgetary needs, the CRM solution, customer relationship management, that's how people report out, street lights that are out or weeds or something like that. It's an old program that would be much better if we upgraded. Develop an IT master plan, that's a one-time expense of 75,000. Add network access control and secure network endpoints, that's 82,000. That's just again boosting our network security. And new software for payroll budgeting and for producing our 5-year forecast. There is good software out there. Right now we do these things on Excel, and it is very labor intensive, takes a long time, and a lot of human touch in there, so things can go wrong with formulas and that sort of a thing.
So the one item about this additional network detection solution, right? So is that something, nowadays it's become very popular about ransomware attacks, right? So is that something
So what you're talking about, the 75,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the cost of hiring a consultant or I think it's a consultant. It could be actual software itself, but it is penetration a penetration study.
Strategy.
So
Penetration
basically,
test,
it
basically.
identifies any potential weaknesses in the system where someone could get in.
Okay, but we are not reducing, we are not going to compromise our network with any of this, right? So it's very critical, especially everywhere we see these ransomware attacks.
Right. Okay, thank you with that. We will call up Lauren Barr in Community Development.
Good afternoon. So community development is planning services, building services. We also do business license and code enforcement. In terms of our major action items, we'll continue the work on the general plan update, including zoning ordinance, adoption of objective standards, non-retail land use policy, revising our findings of approval, and updating development standards. We also will continue to work on the climate action plan and a transition to a multi-department implementation strategy. We're scheduled to start work on our Nexus fee study for impact fees. And then also we have goals for working on our housing element program development and making sure we streamline development review process. Also, we want to make sure that we continue to meet the needs for state and local requirements, staff training, and then, of course, making sure we have succession planning and the ability to respond to changes in the environment. In terms of the building division, their major action items are to continue plan check and inspection services for both the large-scale projects that are in the pipeline, as well as the day-to-day construction projects with the residential development. We also have the same need to keep current on state and local requirements, succession planning, and then from a code enforcement standpoint, we want to continue to monitor commercial properties consistent with city standards for nuisance and zoning regulations. So our initial budget overview here, we had an increase of 941,000. We have minor increases for the community development administration side, mostly contracts and materials. For planning services, we had an increase of about 300,000, primarily due to salaries, which seems to be the theme. We also had some increases in training and supplies. With regard to building and safety services, they had an increase of approximately 633,000. Again, personnel costs were driving a lot of that increase. There was a decrease in contract services and then some minor adjustments to materials, supplies, and training. With regard to the Fund 201, which is general plan recovery fees that we collect on new development applications, they're going through the building permit process. We had the expenditures decrease by $203,000. And that's largely due to an effort we were making toward planning to get a planner for housing programs. And so we reallocated what was normally associated with staff salaries to make way for that potential new planner. But that has since been put on hold, given the budget concerns we have. Now, in terms of the revenue side of things, we have planning services going up by about $163,000 in terms of revenue. Building and safety services, about $177,000. And then with the non-general fund, the 201 fund, we have a projected revenue of $340,000. And that's a decrease in approximately $234,000. And that's largely due to the timing of larger projects that might come into the city. And so when those projects go under construction and the permits are issued is when we collect those fees. So it's just really a question of when those projects will start. In terms of our budget adjustments, we have a decrease in $678,000. A big chunk of that is due to reallocating existing salaries to that 201 fund. As we'd mentioned, we'd taken them away in anticipation of new staffing. But so $275,000 which will come back out of the general fund and be assigned to the 201 fund. We also are recommending to eliminate the school district courier service that's interoffice. We also are recommending at this time suspending the Citizens Planning Academy. We're also looking at unfunding a building services office specialist for about 185,000. And then also eliminating passport services as well as unfunding a temporary permit tech. And then lastly, in terms of larger items, we're looking at a reduction in plan check services of $100,000.
What will that do to the time lag for people to actually get permits?
Well, it largely depends on the workflow, as you can imagine. What we do have the ability to do, and we can talk about it in terms of right here, future budgetary needs. If a large project were to come in, they will be paying their plan check fees, and we can do a budget adjusted at mid-year to use contract services for that. But it's always going to be a balancing act between capacity we have and the revenues we have in terms of whether we go out or do it in-house. So I don't have a specific time frame in terms of a delay that might result. Again, it varies week to week, month to month based on the workload.
But allocation or reallocation of those services, consulting services, is it pretty easy to get it, or is it like?
Well, we have standard contracts for on-call services, but if we need to increase the amount of those contracts because of large projects coming in, we have to go through an appropriation and change the contract term. So it takes a little bit of time, but it's not months. It's
Okay.
few weeks.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Is it possible to adjust it, like maybe our fees when it comes to like, and when you talk about eliminating passport services, is there anything that we can do there?
My understanding, and I'll defer to the clerk, but the fee for the passports is set. And so we're currently collecting roughly $50,000 of those fees, but we're also spending half of a staff person to operate that program. And so by eliminating that half a person can go back to building services, and then we can eliminate the temporary position for a similar amount of money. It's sort of a net neutral, but it helps with service levels.
And also US Post Office provide those services.
Yeah, there are other places that can do it. The other thing that I need to emphasize is that when we collect these building permit fees, oftentimes these span over multiple fiscal years. And, because a construction project like Belmont Village over there, it's, 18 months of work. So we only get the fee up front, but we have to cover those costs throughout the entire development side of things. And then going forward in terms of future staffing, we need to keep pace with development. So as, workload increase, we need staff to deal with that. Otherwise, services get slower and slower. And so we have a series of potential staffing needs going forward, including a couple of office specialists, a senior inspector, plans examiner, as well as a code enforcement officer. And then, as I mentioned earlier, with all the changes in state housing law and reporting requirements, we really do have a need for a planner that's dedicated toward housing programs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Denton and Police Services. Anyways, sorry, are there any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Just to touch on the plan of action for police services is what I'm going to do. It's several other departments have done is talk about what our proposed budget was and outline that, and then dive into some of the reductions that were requested to outline in front of you of what it would take for a 10% reduction in the police budget. So as you see the major action plan here, I'm not going to go into these in incredible detail. We were in front of you and I was here 2 weeks ago talking about what our plans are moving forward. But obviously we are going to continue with our collaborative work, focus on patrol, retail theft, conduct citywide EOC training to ensure the city is prepared should a critical incident occur, and then also focus on training and then officer wellness. And these are some of the things that we discussed a couple of weeks ago when I was here in front of you. So to keep moving on this is our proposed budget. This was what was submitted in February for review. As you can see, the overwhelming majority of our costs are personnel costs. Those 13% that you see there will be on the next slide, but to explain that pie chart, 13% is related to our fixed contract costs. And then our true operating expenditure budget is about 5%. And I'll go through some of those to really explain what it is. But overwhelmingly, our costs are related to personnel. As you can see, 82.3% of the budget, the increases of 23% from year to year going into 24-25 was just over 5.2 million. Now, obviously understand that that is 98.4% of our budgetary increases, but that also includes the 5 retail theft prevention positions that were added through the grant funding. Those are charged to the general fund, but those are 100% reimbursable. So you'll see the increase in revenue in a slide later on, and I'll talk about that offset and how it comes about. But again, that 23% does include those 5 additional positions that we added in the current fiscal year. So we have not added any additional employees to the police department for 24-25. In our proposed budget. And we've only added 2 general fund FTEs since 16-17. And those were a fleet manager and then also a police officer that, if you recall, a little over 3 years ago was funded at a 50% rate through Contra Costa County for our personnel to be a part of the mental health evaluation team. So those are only 2 positions that we've added in the last several years. Now, I want to take note, if you look at the asterisks at the very bottom there. So part of our contract costs, which are included in the 13% pie that you see there, are employee-related costs to our joint communications center. If you add those costs in, our total employee costs in our personnel section equates to 87.6% of our overall budget. So we don't really have anywhere to slice and dice other than personnel to really get those reductions, because we have to put gas in our cars, and the cost of gas for us goes up just like everybody else does. Fleet maintenance, all of those costs are going up. So a little bit of those costs to explain. We talk about contract costs. That's 4.6 million. That's the 13% that you see on the pie chart there. That includes our dispatch services, animal services, our body-worn camera system, in-car camera systems, digital evidence solutions, fleet maintenance, peer support, crime lab, East Bay Regional Communication System costs, which we cover for the entire city within our budget. Department of Justice fees, Cal ID fees, all of those things are fixed contract costs that add up to that 4.6 million. The rest that you see, which is a little over 4% in our budget, 1.7 and 2.5, 582 of that is related to fuel, training, officer equipment, office supplies, the things that really keep us functioning. And then the other costs are associated with vehicle replacements as they age out, computer replacements, officer hiring costs, our training budget, and community programs and youth programs that we put on to engage with the community and really stay connected. So now we're going to shift to what it would look like if those tier 1 and tier 2 costs, if you select to move on those. Personnel costs would decrease to 25.3 million. It's 2.79 million. That would still keep us over 82% of our overall budget in the personnel costs. And if you look at the number down below with the fixed costs of the communication center, that would bump our personnel costs up to 88.2% of our overall budget. This would include unfunding 11 positions within the police department, 7 of those being sworn peace officers. Since I presented to you 2 weeks ago, I've already received, unfortunately, 2 resignation letters for officers who are transferring to other organizations that are closer to home for them. We do have these vacancies right now. I also have 6 personnel that the police department, or 6 applicants that are in our hiring process. Some of those I'd be ready to give final offers to right now, but we can't do that because these positions aren't fully funded for the next fiscal year. And I'm not going to offer someone a position if it's not going to be there. All of these positions are critical to our response and our operations when you talk about sworn positions. I think what we're seeing in this, and I talked to you 2 weeks about it, retention and Keeping people in law enforcement these days is more difficult than ever. It's a free agent market. People are going all over the place. All of these 7 positions are critical incident response positions. They are all people that are here during the week. They're here when school's in session, when workplaces are filled. They're all first responder positions within the police department, every single one of them. But I think what we're seeing with people that are looking to find that work-life balance, unfortunately, cost of living here in San Ramon is incredibly high. There's one house that's for sale under 1.4 million in San Ramon right now. In today's market, you're at 9,200 a month to afford that house if you just happen to have 280,000 laying around. So the departures that we just recently had were officers trying to find a better work-life balance where they're closer to home. And so unfortunately, we're in the same market for that. But these are positions that are on it. What this would do if those positions were removed is, I mentioned 2 weeks ago, we're already walking a tightrope. These are positions that if someone is in a long-term injury position, maybe we could move that person into that role and fund that non-patrol related spot. As I mentioned to you before, our focus will always be on patrol. We will push people to patrol services. We need to be able to get there when they need us. Those long-term vacancies, we have, like I said, we have 3 right now in our agency, whether it's injuries or whatever the circumstances are. Those positions will have to be backfilled on patrol and overtime costs and everything related to that. So again, all of these that you see before you, you saw it in the staff report. You saw the tier 1 and 2 tier positions. You know what those equate to. It would be 2 officers within our community resource and crime prevention division. It would be 1 traffic officer, 1 traffic sergeant, 1 investigator, and a reduction in our school resource officer, going down to 1 school resource officer for the entire city. Not necessarily in my philosophy of where law enforcement should go. There's also 4 administrative positions within those tier 1 and tier 2 cuts. And like I said, these are not cuts. This is the only way we can reach that 10% level within the police department. But that is a program manager, an office specialist in finance, police service technician on patrol, and office technician within records. And so I think when you go towards the priorities of what we're going to do in law enforcement, making sure that we're there for the community when they need us, all of these positions, especially the sworn positions, the absence of those positions will create a greater burden on patrol. And so if I didn't tell you that it will impact our response times, and I will predict that it will impact our response times, our ability to serve at the schools, engage with the community, all of those things are going to be a major factor if this is the direction that the council goes. The other decreases that we put in place were in our contract costs. Minor decreases there because so many of these are fixed costs. One of them was holding off on the implementation of software technology that we were going to utilize. The other significant reductions were in material supplies and the other costs, and you're looking at the elimination of our K-9 program, deferring equipment supplies and replacements, reducing our SWAT budget and deferring equipment purchases for that team. Then the other costs, you're looking at the reductions of $481,000 in vehicle replacements, and that's deferring the replacements of 4 vehicles that are in schedule to be replaced in 24-25, reducing our employee training and development, officer startup costs, equipment replacement, et cetera. You can read it there. It also includes the elimination of 1 of our community academies per year, and then also the elimination of our Explorer and youth programs, youth academy that takes place during the summer. Again, within the staff report, you can see the dollar amounts associated with all of those, but that is what it would entail. And I think the biggest thing is really seeing kind of where that would put us as a law enforcement organization and the impact that it would make. If you look at our revenue increases, I mentioned 2 weeks ago, law enforcement should not be a revenue generating exercise, but I will make an exception when we can get state grant funding to increase our revenue. And that's what we did in 23-24 this last fiscal year. And I've been in front of you several times talking about the Organized Retail Theft Prevention Grant. So what that did is that's going to, with the anticipated revenue from salary, benefits, equipment, software licensing, et cetera, is going to be almost $1.5 million in revenue for the police department to offset some of those costs. The one decrease is that mental health evaluation team grant, which is expiring after a 3-year period. That would be a partial funding for that officer position at about $164,000 per year. We also are seeing increase in the false alarm billing that we have throughout the city. As you remember, a couple of years ago, we came forward with adjusting that ordinance and going to a third-party management for that system. So that's the other significant thing that you see there. The one thing that you will not see in this presentation here is any capital improvement. Within our budget, we had one, which is why it isn't even on that pie chart, but it was $8,600 for scene lighting, which was reduced out of there. But that's the only capital expenditure that we even included in our proposed budget. So I wanted to throw this in there just as a comparison because I wanted you to see where we stand funding. Now, this is the reduced budget that you see there. If you remember, our proposed budget is just under 34.2 million. But if you look at our three comparable cities who have their own municipal police departments in the local area, we are significantly below them, even if we had our entire proposed budget included of 34.2. Our total employees, if you include the shared employees at the communications center, there are 13 employees that are a shared cost there, so 6.5 would come along our budget. So that would only, if you took those 11 unfunded and the 6.5, it would only take us up to just over 100 employees. And if you compare it to the other police departments out there, I would have to say I would love to have $4.8 million extra and another, with Walnut Creek has 9 additional sworn officers, Pleasanton has 11 additional officers above our current authorization of 74. I'd love to see what we could do with that, but I understand where we are in the city of San Ramon. I just wanted to make sure this was out there just as a comparable, but we are walking an extreme tightrope when it comes to public safety, even without the reductions that were in those tier 1 and tier 2 costs cuts. So I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I see police officer for school resources, right?
Yes.
I see we have a school board member here. Is it possible, is there any scope that they can share so that we can have additional resource?
I've started the conversation. I spoke with the assistant superintendent roughly about a month ago, and I told them ahead of time, and I said, this is where we are headed with these potentials. For 17 years, we've fully funded within the police department all of the school resource officers for every agency. To me, it's an important aspect of what we do, being there for the youth in the community. At one point, we used to have 4 school resource officers. We're down to 2 currently, and based on where the direction is, we'll see what happens in 24, 25. But we did have 4, and just because of having to shift the resources to patrol, we've had to reduce that. And that's happened with several divisions, not just school resource. Our community resource and crime prevention used to have 6 people. We now have 2. And so it's been a significant difference, but it is something that I've already explored with the school district and potential grant funding to help offset the costs or what we could do as far as a cost sharing measure. So I've been in contact already.
And on mental health, don't we work with fire department for that funding, and also county? Is it county helps us if we want to get that resource?
Oh, sure. So the one position that we have right now is part of the mental health evaluation team. That's the MHET that you see the acronym up there. And what that is that's a county program that in central Contra Costa County, there's one officer assigned to several counselors, and they deal with higher level cases of behavioral health. And so that is the San Ramon officer is assigned to that specific team. There is no net cost for the behavioral health response program to the San Ramon Police Department. We do coordinate with San Ramon Valley Fire Protection Services, but that's a combined joint response program, and there's no real cost effect to that because it's part of what our patrol officers are already doing.
Okay.
So how do you eliminate the K-9 program? I thought K-9s and an officer were kind of teamed up and partnered. How do you eliminate a K-9 but not a program but not an officer?
Well, so K-9s have a working life span. They can only do police work for so long. We're in a position right now, if this is the direction that we end up going, where one of our canine officers his dog has already been working for 5 years, which is roughly what you anticipate the working life for a police dog would be. And the second canine officer will hit the 5-year mark in August, I believe. So we're already getting to the end of the lifespan, if you will, the working life of those canines. And when a canine is retired from service, we would offer the canine handler the opportunity to purchase the canine for $1, and then the officer would then have the canine as long as the canine was alive, and he would be his dog. So there'd be a transition from a working dog to his home dog. And that's standard practice in law enforcement. Any other
So
questions?
What is the impact of patrol services right now? Is it like from 4 to 3 it will become, or
No,
is it
so
like
the impact that you're going to have on patrol services is with the collateral duties that they'll have to take on. So with the reduction in traffic officers, based on this in front of you, if these are put into place, patrol officers will have to handle more traffic collisions instead of officers on the motorcycles handling those traffic collisions. Patrol officers will have to respond to the school more often to handle incidents at the schools based on only one school resource officer instead of 2. You'll have a limited engagement with the community because we're removing 2 community resource and crime prevention officers. So all of these positions, including the administration positions, if you look at the police services technician for patrol, those are, excuse me, that's a non-sworn position in patrol services. So they will actually take traffic collisions, they will investigate, they will do crime scene work, they will do all those things. That all has to be picked up by patrol officers. And so the trickle down effect on that is patrol officers will be in service less often. They'll be tied up on more calls, which will delay the response to critical incident calls. And so that's, we talked 2 weeks ago about the balance of 50-50. That balance of 50-50 was in a great position at the end of 2022. But you saw from 2022 to 2023, we had a 9,000 call for service increase in 1 year. So I don't know if that 50-50 is even in place now. And if these reductions happen and these positions are gone, that 50-50 is not going to be nearly as equitable as we would hope it would be. So we are just going to have to, as a police department, since we started in 2007, we've never said no. It's been incredibly rare. But, for example, we talked about the program, and you mentioned the program 2 weeks ago associated with education when it comes to sexual assault. I don't know that we would have anywhere near the capacity to be able to do something like that. And that's where you're going to see those things. And again, these are all first responder positions. When you talk about sworn positions and the 7 that's on the screen right now, that's 7 people who wouldn't be able to respond to a critical incident if something happens. Normally we have a lot of people that are here during school hours, when most people are at work. All of these positions that you see on the screen right there are people that would be normally working during those traditional business hours who wouldn't be there. So that's the reality of what it will be. And all of those absences will have an impact on patrol because those officers will have to cover for what these positions wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah. I'm very surprised to see this. What is this? Firearm quality, right? So what is that? Firearm replacements.
Yeah.
You don't want to have
So-
bad firearms.
So they have a lifespan. And we've been operating on a roughly a 5 to 6 year lifespan. And our handguns are up for that replacement. And this is what we've done over the history of our organization. Is every 5 or 6 years we replace them. And it's not at a true cost of a 1-to-1 of how much it costs, because there are retailers and firearm license dealers that will buy back our used ones, and then we will get a discount on the purchase of the new ones. And then they can resell them later. But we actually purchase new firearms at about a 50% rate because of that buyback program that we have. And so it would be for the purchase and replacement of handguns and rifles that are at the end of their lifespan.
Yeah. But I see the impact is malfunction of equipment. That's-
I was a firearms instructor for
So we don't want
15
that.
plus years, and I think I may have been out there when you were in the community academy, and they do malfunction
Yeah.
with overuse. You get springs that deteriorate, you get chambers that don't take you get magazines that malfunction, you get all different things that can go into it when you get a firearm that is older.
That's not good.
Well, I know we're going through every department here, but this one really caught my attention because, as you mentioned, a lot of the big costs for you are in personnel. And there's quite a few impacts here for, for traffic, for community resource, school resource officers, and the public facing things, even your training and that sort of thing. And I know when we get to the end of this, we're going to take a look at what we might be able to put in, but I'm sure, I got some serious concerns about cutting a lot of these positions there. Just to be clear though, a lot of these positions you're talking about are not currently staffed and there's no one in some of these positions. It's just we're going to unfund that vacant position. Is that right?
Correct. And so these positions are now, when I presented to you 2 weeks ago, we had 5 vacant police officer positions. We had 2 resignations that I received between now and then, again, for officers trying to find that balance of home and work. And we also have 6 current applicants in the hiring process that have gone through the interviews with me, gone through the oral interviews, and are in the process to become police officers. Now, I don't know if every single one of them will meet our standards once we go through the entire background process and get to the final point. But we have people, and I just had an email today of another applicant that came into the system that I always look at the name and search where they're from or anything else. But there are still applications coming in. But this would slow that, and we wouldn't be able to hire any of those potential candidates.
Okay. Right.
And with that being said, if you look at the budgetary impact of $2 million for those 7 sworn positions, we wouldn't be able to hire 7 positions on July 1. So that's a budget impact for what it would cost for the entire year for those. If they were filled, there's no way we'd be able to swear. First of all, our training program couldn't handle 7 officers coming in at once. So they would not be 7 positions that would be filled for the entire year. That's not reality. So it wouldn't be a full $2 million cost if those positions were funded. It would go in the budget as a full $2 million cost, but in reality, that expenditure wouldn't equate to what the budgeted amount would be. If I'm making that clear, I also may have made that about as clear as mud, but I'm trying.
So off the topic, this is a little bit on your point about the retention, right? Because they are not able to afford here. But if we have affordable housing for SRPD, you think we can have better retention?
I think it all depends. I don't know. I can't tell you because I don't know what form that would be in. I'm sure if that was a possibility, a younger officer coming in that may not be established with his family in a certain spot, that may be a very attractive option. But we get a lot of lateral applicants, meaning experienced peace officers that come here who are already established. They already have children. Their families are located someplace. Kids are in the school system. I don't know whether those candidates would uproot and come here. So it's hard to say. I don't think it would hurt, but I don't know exactly what the effectiveness would be for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, or who's next, Kelly?
Parks. Public Works.
We'll go over future staffing needs later.
Yeah.
I've done too much.
She's back.
Good afternoon. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, talk about the public facilities, public amenities, and public infrastructure. So I'll start with I just turned it off. Do I- Maybe that was.
Also, Mayor, and Council, I think this is slide 61 out of 90. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of how far we are in the process.
Okay. All right, so starting with transportation and major action plan items. We'll be completing the bike master plan update. That's already ongoing and should be completed by the end of this calendar year. There are a number of projects that we're doing in the TDM program. We'll be completing the Vision Zero Action Plan and continuing to participate in the Innovate 680 program as a key stakeholder for program projects. In the engineering division, we have our overcrossing projects. As you can see, Bollinger Canyon Road, Iron Horse Trail. Overcrossing is moving along well. We anticipate completion by August of 2025. For the Crow Canyon Iron Horse Trail overcrossing, that we anticipate having a complete submittal of 65% for the design. For roadway projects, we will be completing the construction of the Crow Canyon widening project by the, end of this calendar year. And then we will be working on the construction of the pavement management program 2024. The ITS master plan upgrades that just went to the council this April. So we'll starting that construction shortly. And then we'll also be updating the intelligence system master plan update this coming fiscal year. In the public services division, we'll continue to do a number of acceptances for maintenance in the Faria Preserve area, as well as the little bit that's left in the Doherty Valley area. The landscaping lighting district, special zone 6, this is the West Branch zone. We'll be completing the analysis of funding alternatives and conduct outreach to the HOAs as well as the residents. The cricket pitch at Quail Run Elementary School, the design is underway. We will start construction as soon as school is out this summer and complete that project by the end of the summer. For the San Ramon Olympic Pool, we have it scheduled to replaster the lap pool. And we are working on the citywide fleet electrification study. We plan on presenting that to the council this coming fiscal year.
I wish we would stop calling it an electrification study. Because as I've said on a couple of different occasions, there are alternatives to electrification that still reduce greenhouse gases. And if your consultant has ignored those other options, such as hydrogen fuel cells or hydrogen engines, I will be very, very disappointed in this report, and we will have missed an opportunity.
Yes, understood. Okay. Solid waste rates for rate period 6. We'll be reviewing those from the consultant's assessment, implementing the polystyrene foam foodware restrictions, and continuing the implementation of the compliance measures for SB 1383. So looking at our budget, our department expenditures totals $43.53 million. This is an increase of $4.5 million or 11.5%. The costs are mostly associated with personnel. That's a little over 51% of the expenditures. Contracts is $10.9 million, an increase of 600, and that's due to the various annual percent increases, and that makes up about 25%. And then utilities, as the city manager mentioned earlier, that's $8.1 million, an increase of $1.6 million, and that's based on increases of rates and usage. And this makes up almost 20% of the total expenditure budget. We continue to include these reductions from the previous year, such as window cleaning, deferred repairs, floor refinishing, and resurfacing. These are mostly aesthetic in nature and are non-safety issues. And we're reducing various contracts, performing work in-house, reducing frequencies in maintenance and repairs. Looking specifically at personnel, this slide shows the number of positions that are either vacant, frozen, or unfunded. These are all due to either external promotional opportunities, internal promotions, and new positions. We are not able to fill these positions at this time. So as we have been dealing with it in the past, we're absorbing workload and reprioritizing tasks with the current staff that we have. Service level impacts will occur on the new park acceptances and existing parks. There will be a delay in response to services, and the use of contractors to keep up with priority workloads may increase contract costs. Another slide I thought would be important to share is utilities. So as you can see, over the last 4 years, the cost of utilities for water, gas, and electric have increased over this 4-year period. For 24-25, the total amount, as I mentioned, is 8.1 million. And the cost increase in percentage-wise, water has increased 9%, and gas and electricity has increased 13%. So we're going to be continuing to see that as in the future years. Another item I'd like to highlight are the contract annual increases. This is a list of all of our contracts that have our annual increase that are built into our contracts. So these have to be implemented as part of the contractual language with each of these contractors. So if you look at this, the annual increases range from 2%, 3%, all the way up to 5%. And therefore, we do need to include these increases as part of our expenditure. The total contracts and utilities totals 19 million. So in looking at additional reductions, trying to get our numbers down for expenditures for 24-25, it was important to look at what our expenses were from the general fund and Doherty Valley. And as you can see from this slide, the proposed expenditures in these two funds alone is close to 35 million. And that is close to 13% of our total budget. Looking at it by divisions, transportation, engineering, and public services, as you can see, each one of them has a contribution for tier 1 and tier 2. I wanted to note that transportation's cut is actually 21% of their total budget. So we did hit about a 12% decrease in 12% of the reductions based on the tier 1 and tier 2 that we are proposing. Looking at our revenues, we originally proposed 4.4 million. This is a decrease of 435,000 or minus 9%. The reason for the reduction or the decrease in revenue is mostly due to the development projections that we're not receiving these fees this fiscal year versus last fiscal year. We did look at the revenues once again, and we're able to look at what our most recent schedules and proposals are. And so with that, we were able to look and increase the encroachment permit fees, development plan check fees, and the development inspection fees. And in addition to that, we increased the sports field usage rate by 543,000, and that was to be consistent with the parks departments. I want to talk a little bit about our tier system. The numbers of 5%, 10% have been mentioned. In Public Works, we looked at it from a somewhat different approach. And what I mean by that is we looked at tier 1 as what has minimal impact to the public from a visual standpoint, what is not a safety issue, any funding reallocations from general fund to other funding sources, impacts, things like that. So we identified these items in tier 1. In tier 2, as you look at this list, you're going to see that these will be noticeable reduction or noticeable to the residents and the users. It will have larger impact to deferral costs, bigger impact to staff and workload, and it will just have just a larger impact overall. So if you look at tier one, we're looking at reductions in trail maintenance, carpet cleaning by 50%. Window cleaning, we will not be doing this year. We didn't do it last year. Floor refinishing, we're going to move it to next fiscal year. So removed it from this fiscal year's budget. Looking at janitorial services and reducing that. Pest control, roadway striping. We have reduced our trainings, conferences, and employee appreciation by 43,000. And we're looking at reducing temp staff for admin, parks, and roadway. At the tier two level, we're looking at the Bollinger Fountain usage, reducing the hours, park landscape maintenance in Doherty Valley, the Crow Canyon garden maintenance, the non-routine to keep that area cleaned up, staff personnel reallocations, and this is using gas tax to fund staff for this fiscal year only. We're looking at school park sports field renovations, reducing it by 50%, tree maintenance, parks in Doherty Valley, parks and landscape water, a 10% reduction, and reduction in consultant professional services. So I know it's a long list, but we have a lot of items that we had to look at and determine what to prioritize and what to present to the council at this time.
I
So
don't
this-
know who, well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't know who's responsible for the actual garden plots of individuals out at Crow Canyon Gardens. I was out there on Sunday, and there are probably a dozen out there that are receiving no attention by their leaseholder or whoever that is. Do we have a enforcement opportunity or what can we do? Because I'll talk to Kathy then
Yeah.
next time through. And so I assume that the routine maintenance is you just mow the big grassy area every other week or so and empty the garbage can.
Correct. And that,
You can't reduce that a whole lot.
well, and that cost is still in there. What
Okay.
we did have in there was a one-time cleanup. So as you probably remember, the weeds and the rodents and the dilapidation of the fence. So we put in a cost to just keep the site looking presentable until such time we could move forward with that project. So it's the non-routine cleanup that we're talking about that we have removed.
Okay, thank you.
On pest control one, is this specifically for our sports field and parks? Because county provides us with vector management, right? So is this how it is different from what county service is providing us?
Are you saying related to which one?
Pest control?
Oh, pest control. No, we do that all ourselves. This is for our facilities and our parks.
Parks and,
Mhm.
okay. But county doesn't cover those.
They do not, no. I wish.
Thank you.
I mentioned earlier, there are some reductions that we carried over from last year. Also included on that list is a continued reduction in professional services, unfunding the GIS specialist, shifting some FTE allocations from general fund to other funding sources. Let's see, reduced various contracts performed in-house. I had mentioned that. And in-house staff performing more work to minimize contract increases. So based on these proposed reductions, we are going to see a reduced service of levels of service. For instance, the carpets, we're going to see increased wear. We're going to have to prioritize which ones we do. So the ones that are public areas, we will prioritize. In-house staff may have to offset. For tree removals and replacements and maintenance, we will definitely address the hazard trees, but they may not get replaced, meaning no new plantings. We'll have to transition from routine structural pruning to prioritizing clearances and hazards. We may also be seeing more damage to sidewalks due to tree roots. We'll be concerned with the reoccurring tree health issues and increased staff workload. For janitorial, for both parks and facilities, we're proposing the reduction there. But reducing the frequency will result in reduced cleanliness, resident satisfaction. Prioritize public areas is what we'll need to do. And we're looking at staff deployment as necessary for the facilities where staff are located. Landscape maintenance, reducing the frequency there would result in more visible weeds, delay in annual maintenance. Park landscape maintenance, we're looking at doing less passive turf mowing and pruning. This will result in increased weed visibility, and we're also looking at reduced ball field maintenance. I mentioned the Bollinger Fountain operations. We're looking at reducing the hours, days of operation. And we do get a lot of calls on that one, by the way, a lot. Reduced watering for parks and landscape. So we're talking about doing the 10% reduction in watering. What that'll do is stress some of the younger plantings that we have. We'll have to prioritize irrigation, and we'll have to work with our field staff. There are over 37 of them who manage the adjustment of the water schedules. And the big one I want to mention is a number of these items are on contract. So we would have to have discussions with each one of these contractors, changing their scope, reducing their scope, and reaching out to them on determining how these percent reductions work. So it's just not a 20% is going to mean, how do you determine what 20% reduction is? It's not just gonna be a cut of the contract amount. It's going to be, okay, we're not going to do these areas, these areas, and let's see what that adds up to. So that would be part of the process in developing these reductions. Some of the future budgetary needs, we are looking at the acceptance of Critter Crossroads Park in 2024. The cost of that is about $64,000. That excludes personnel costs. And we're also looking at Rancho San Ramon Phase 2 in 24-25. Did I say 24-25? And that cost is $77,000. Some of the future budgetary needs, we have proposed $100,000 in reduction for the fleet replacement charge. So by deferring this amount, we are not going to fund any of the replacement of the vehicles for 24-25. And we have to look out in the future as to what this does to this, the replacement plan and the funding there. There is no funding for zero emissions vehicle replacements and the infrastructure costs associated with that. There will be increase in deferred maintenance costs due to the 24-25 level of service reductions. I mentioned the gas tax contribution of $600,000. What that'll do likely is impact the PCI, dropping from 1 to 1.5 over a 5-year period. The one-time reductions of materials and supplies will need to be restored in fiscal year 25-26. And as I mentioned earlier, continued increases in utility rates and usage, contract inflations, and cost of materials and supplies. Any questions?
Questions before we get the next one up?
No, what I'm seeing though is a lot of things are getting deferred. And that kind of looks like one times. If you say you're not going to buy any supplies this year, but you're going to buy supplies next year, that's a deferral, not a reduction. I mean, it's a reduction, but it's not a reduction that can be sustained. And so we're seeing a significant fraction of that 8 million is one-time deferrals, possibly two-time deferrals, but you can't sustain a program by deferring all your vehicle replacements and all your supply replacements and things like that. So some fraction of that 8 million is going to come bounding back at 1 to 1.5 times its savings in this year going into the next year. Is that true, Mr.
Yeah,
City Manager?
that's a good way of categorizing it. Not only will we have difficulty bringing it back to the maintenance levels that we once saw, there could be damage, that is done to landscaping and replanting, and that's in addition to the deferred maintenance. then you are also increasing some of your replacement costs, trying to get back to those levels.
Yeah,
So it's basically what you're saying is what we've been experiencing overall with our budget. With Kelly's slides earlier, we deferred, and now some of those deferrals are coming home and can no longer be deferred. So we're looking at other deferrals, just to balance the budget.
the reductions in manpower are savings. Because when they get restored, they don't get restored at 1.5 times. They get, for the most part. And so savings in manpower or training or travel, and some of those are in fact savings in the current or this future fiscal year that don't come back. I mean, you want to restore them in the future year, but if you had vehicles that you're not replacing this year or coming year, you're going to not only have those vehicles, but you'll have the following year vehicles. So now you've got 2 years worth of vehicles in the following year. And that's what I'm
Sure.
referring to, is some of those deferrals will come back and will be part of the 25-26 budget at 1 to 1.5 times to 2 times the savings in the 24-25 budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless our revenues magically increase.
There we go. Let's do that.
Let's try and keep it to questions. We still have public comment tonight.
Thank you.
I'll briefly go through the major action items for our 2 GADs, our Doherty Valley and Northwest San Ramon. The action plans for those are to undertake acceptances for both of the GADs as appropriate. We'll complete the reserve fund studies and engineers reports and set assessments for 25-26, complete maintenance, inspections, and repairs as needed, and work with conservation easement holders to maintain or enhance environmental benefits. And as you know, the GADs are both funded from those particular districts. There's no general fund impact to these, to this program.
Thank you, Maria. Good seeing you again. Can't get away, can you?
You're not very good at retirement. I can speak from experience on that one.
All right, I think I'm the last one here. So it's no longer good afternoon, it's good evening, Mayor, Council. Let me take you through what's going on in Parks and Community Services. So just quickly, we normally have a huge major action plan. We've pared that down this year to just a few things. And as time allows, if staffing and resources allow, we will increase that, of course. But just in short, we know about everyone wanting us to focus on that shade on the Iron Horse Trail. So we're going to try really hard to see if we can pull people together for that. We're looking at the woodlot and gathering community feedback to get some concept plans for that, doing some more with our business community and our corporate softball league, working with our senior programs and our 55+ living facilities to try and connect them to our senior services. Of course, focusing on Crook Canyon Gardens and increasing some public engagement there, as well as reallocating programs in our gyms to increase space for badminton and implementing all of the goals in the master plan. So when we started out this year with our budget, we started out with a $10 million budget, which was an increase of $744,000 or 8%. And the vast majority of the money that increased in our budget was, as everyone had, in salaries, full-time salaries and part-time salaries, which reached over 600,000 of that 744,000 increase. The rest were spread out amongst contracts, about 50,000, and supplies, other, and our continued unfunded positions. Our initial revenue budget was a $5.2 million, which was only a 1% increase, and brought our general fund subsidy to about 4.7. With the decrease, we actually, with 10% decrease, we actually decreased our expenditures below the current year by $6,000. And that was primarily because of the unfunding of the open office tech position, as well as a major decrease in our temp staff salaries, a big decrease in our contracts due to all of the reductions we're going to talk about, and minor increases or to our materials and supplies and reductions in training. In department revenues, in order to meet that 10% goal, we did do an increase. So we were able to increase 305,000 or 6%. So with that, we moved our cost recovery on the general fund or in general from what was a 52% to almost 60% and brought our general fund subsidy down to 3.7, which is actually, we're kind of proud of this, the $311,000 less of a reliance on the general fund than the current year. How do we get there? So because we're a department that works on that cost recovery concept, we look at revenue. So we did several revenue enhancements to get at that $1 million we needed for the 10% cut. And so we started with the synthetic and grass sports fields. Those fees go up $1 per hour every year. And this year we're proposing to increase a second dollar, but we would hold that increase until the 1st of January to give the sports user groups time to plan for that, because we think it's not quite fair to say, hey, you're going to get $2 increase rather than $1 in just a couple months. The same is increasing our rec swim fees by an additional $1. We would wait on that until January to allow everyone time to understand that. That would net us an additional $22,000. We are increasing all the indoor facility rental hourly rates by 3% to bring in another $27,000. We're adjusting our tennis contract instructor split. That is a negotiation. So we'd hope that we would be able to bring up another $123,000, reducing our little dribblers program, kind of changing what we do because we can generate a little more revenue by doing gym rentals. So we would still have a little dribblers program, but we would be reducing the number of participants so that we could rent the space and bringing in an extra 10,000. In addition, increasing all our group and aquatic picnic rates and identifying new group picnic areas. So all of that brings in $250,000 extra dollars. In addition to the public services nets a portion of the grass field fees, which you heard about already. When it came to cuts, in order for us to cut $750,000 from our budget, we had to do it in lots of little pieces. So if you actually saw the whole list, there were 110 individual ones. And so we have narrowed them down and consolidated to make them a little easier to understand. So we had 66,000 reductions in our marketing, advertising, contracts, and print materials. The thing that's most notable there is the elimination of the holiday street banners and wreaths. We would still have those lights that come up Bollinger Canyon. Those are in partnership with Bishop Ranch. We left those in, but all of the rest of the banners and all of the rest of the wreaths we removed. We've reduced the activities guide page count. Right now you have that large catalog. It's reduced significantly. So we will be less money for advertising, less money for postcards and brochures. And of course, we'll be working more towards digital items. We still will have an activity guide. And then we renegotiated our venue tech contract to extend and gained a little extra reduction there. We, of course, reduced all of our program supplies, equipment repair and replacement. I think you've been hearing that. So supplies in general. The main thing you'll see is the downsizing of the mobile modular restroom at Crow Canyon Gardens to an ADA porta potty. That will save us around $7,000. We'll also have a reduction in equipment maintenance, cleaning, and replacement. So tables, couches, chairs, all the things you find in the community centers, we're deferring a good number of those. And then reductions in staff training, staff apparel, volunteer recognition to the tune of an additional $12,000. As you keep going, it gets harder, right? So the next set of cuts that we made relate to all of our free programs or programs that don't subsidize themselves as much. So since many of the things we do generate revenue, it's more difficult to cut a program that generates a lot of revenue, even if it doesn't cover all its costs, because you don't make the net change in the general fund subsidy. So what we're trying to do is lower our reliance on the general fund. And so you needed to look at the free things or the things that don't generate a lot. So the top of that list is eliminating the additional library hours for $381,000. Doesn't mean we won't have library services, because we will. The county provides 40 hours of service for each library, which gives San Ramon 80 hours of service. This these are the 22 extra hours that the city pays for. So that's one. The tree lighting
Kathy,
event.
one
Mhm.
quick question.
Sure.
Also, Diablo Valley College, right, DVC, they have the library.
Yes.
So that is also open. Do we know what the open hours for them?
I'm gonna see, do you know, Brad?
I mean, it's based off of the school schedule, so during the normal school period, it's normally traditionally an 8 to 4, 8 to 5, Thursday and Friday. Saturday and Sunday. Then in the summer, they vary those hours or during the holidays.
And that is also public accessible, right? So not only students, everyone can access that library.
It's correct. It's a lovely place, especially for people who want to go and work in a quiet location.
Okay. So, thank you.
All right, and moving on, the elimination of our tree lighting event. I know we just brought it back a few years ago, but Bishop Branch does do one, and so that nets us an additional $5,000. And has some savings for public services who put the lights on the tree and needed to do all the additional work. The elimination of Holiday on the Farm. We are hopeful, of course, that our Historic Foundation may be willing to help pick some of that up. It is in the winter months, and so when it rains, the attendance is poor anyway. The elimination of Fun on the Farm and during the winter months only, again, because of the cold weather, the attendance is lower. So that would save us an additional $2,000. Reducing one summer concert from 5 to 4 concerts, that would be the one right after the 4th of July, would net us an additional $4,000. Changing our beautiful culture in the community event to an indoor event at the Doherty Station Community Arts Center. We just couldn't bear to get rid of it completely. So we thought maybe we could just change that up and put it inside. It will obviously be a smaller scope and won't have quite the same feel, but we do think that's a way to potentially preserve that program without eliminating it completely and reducing its cost. Eliminating our Party in the Park, which is our summer camp fair, would save us an additional $500. And then you can see eliminated the light parade. When we started this budget process at the very beginning, we could see that we weren't going to be able to sustain that $35,000. And that was only the money that was in the Parks and Community Services budget, not the money in Public Works or police. And so that was removed before we even got here. So all of those, and then we have these other programs that have revenue, but they are still subsidized. So we're suggesting that we eliminate one presenting series show from 3 to 2. Way back when we had 8, then it was 5, then there was COVID, then there was 3, and now we're going to 2. That would save us $17,000. If a show sells out completely, it covers its cost, no problem. But statistically, we won't sell out every show. And so prudent budgeting says we're not gonna cross our fingers and hope. So that was a cut. Eliminating professional artist workshop series at the Arts Center for $1,000. We'll look to our local arts foundation and hopefully maybe they'll help us out with that. Eliminating our teen centers at Gale Ranch and Windermere. That's a $10,000 cut. That one is unique because we have 4 teen centers. However, the Gale Ranch and Windermere teen centers have very low enrollment. And on most days, you'll only find 5 or 6 teens there, which make them not cover their costs or really come near it. So the other teen centers are subsidizing those 2 teen centers. So we would recommend removing those and then potentially looking at more contract programs out there to see if that would meet the need. But we just think it's due to the change since COVID. More people work from home and there's less need in that community. It does create inequity. And so that's a challenge with that one. And then eliminating 1 day of senior van service. We did this 2 years ago and then we brought it back this last year. That would be the Mondays. We have probably, I think it's 6 or so people that this affects, but they are seniors, but it's highly subsidized. So that would save us almost $7,000. So all of that together brings us to $438,000 through those cuts, but we're not done. So then we get to staffing. So we have almost $200,000 in staffing reductions. These are particularly challenging because we are a people-oriented, community-facing department. And so when we reduce part-time staff, that means that full-time staff have to pick that up in some way, shape, or form. So our reductions in part-time staffing are across the board in all areas. So we know that we're going to see more weight on the full-time staff. but we reduced our building attendant staffing at Rancho, so that'll be by appointment only, no more just open hours. We reduced staffing at the Art Center, so the building will only be open when programs are scheduled, so you won't be able to just wander in. Reduction in front counter staffing at all of our buildings, and reductions in all just temp staffing for youth, sports, teens, arts, and aquatic center staff. That all came to 64,000. Specific reductions to our aquatic center. We have ending our fall rec swim on Labor Day instead of late September, shortening our off-season midday lap swim by 30 minutes. So right now there's a good chunk of time. So this would narrow the time. So people would need to get in and swim. They just wouldn't have as long of a period to arrive and leave. We'd be reducing the Doherty Valley Aquatic Center services and hours, including limited use of splash and dash, reduction in our play pool hours, our evening rec swim hours, and elimination of weekday and Sunday rec swim. I know that's a lot. We would still have aquatics programs. We would still be open for lap swim 6 days a week and rec swim 3 weekday evenings as well as on Sundays, but it does create a pretty big reduction in that area. But I would like to add that we do have 2 pools and there will be swimming available and pool open in San Ramon. We just wouldn't have them open in both locations. And so it's a hard one. And again, this comes down to equity and balance. And then lastly, unfunding our vacant office technician position. So by unfunding the one position that's currently empty, it results in 2 techs needing to cover 4 counters. Which is a bit of a problem. So then we would have to reduce our hours at those counters. So we would be open for front counter service 4 hours at the San Ramon Community Center, 4 hours at the El Costa Senior and Community Center. And then both those staff would take their lunch and close up that counter and then go out to the 2 pools to manage all the paperwork and the collection of the monies in those locations. So ongoing impacts to the department. We still have the 6 unfunded full-time positions. Over time, the department has gotten smaller and smaller and the workload has increased, which you know. We use technology as much as we can, but I need to draw everyone's attention to the Office Tech 2 program manager, recreation coordinator, office specialist, and 2 technicians that are unfunded. In the future, we're going to need to fund at least some of those positions. We're going to need to increase funding for part-time staff if we would like to return service levels at all the facilities and provide equity and access across the city. The funding for replacement furniture and equipment has been deferred. You just talked about that. We've got the same issue. We can defer and defer and defer, but eventually the couches wear out, the refrigerators break, the bathing suit spinners don't work, and they need to be replaced. And then finally, reinstatement of the free and subsidized programs and events. Those are some of the things that create community, that make people love San Ramon. They're a big part of what we do and who we are. And so although this may not be the year that we can do them, in the future, we'd hope that we'd be able to bring them back. And I think that's my last slide. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. I would ask council if you could hold questions or comments until after public comment. We've got some people who've been waiting here a long time. Okay, let's open the public comment. And do we have any cards?
I have 1 speaker card, Greg Carr.
Greg? Thank you. There'll be more. I'll get them up
Hopefully.
here.
Maybe I can stir that up a little bit.
Maybe.
Greg Carr, San Ramon resident. First, I want to thank staff for doing a very good job. I assume under your tutelage, Steve. Very good presentation. I have disagreements with some of the content, of course, but quite well done. We've got hard choices brought upon us by hard times, and I think Scott hit the thing on the head. If you defer an expense to next year, that's not really a savings from here ad terminum. That's just increasing the future load in some fashion. What you have to do is you have to take things out of the budget, that will be an ongoing reduction. Unfortunately, the predominant expense is staff. That's an unfortunate reality of you being in your jobs and having to look up to the staff who you've seen and known for a long time and who have performed perhaps well, as I think they, most of them have. And somebody's got to go. Either that or you got to get more money. Well, we don't print money here in the city of San Ramon. So the hardest thing to do is to look at that element. There's also cost of services, cost of facilities, but those things, those aren't of the same level. And you're talking about what, $14.1 billion shortfall. The thing that I'm concerned about in the proposed reductions, for example, in the administrative services one, it really caught me. I'm still chuckling inside about it. It's reduction of the third grade tour of City Hall. My God, those are the people we want to capture. Little guys, we want to show them what this is all about. Have them sit up there, have them see who you are, have them understand what's going on. I suggest that you need to come up with a program using the resources you've got within the city to help do some offsets outside of staffing. There's a lot of old people in the city who've been around a long time. I probably represent, a lot of them in terms of my age and experience. I would urge us to try to do that and then have the city attorney come up with an offset of liability that will be both acceptable and allow that to happen, not to just present a roadblock to it. That's about it. I could go on for a long time on this. I spent 4 years up there. I spent 4 years on the finance committee. I do have some modicum of understanding of what it's about. And I'm concerned. Herman Whelm and I, when we sat on the committee, we would have been appalled by this. And I don't think it's any one person's fault. It's a perfect storm of it taking us down monetarily. But don't think that you can go to the pool or not the pool, the well, and try to find other funds from other sources. We need to be able to, as the old thing, live within our means. And that's an unfortunate thing. That means pain for you to make the decision and for some of us to feel the pain and for the citizenry to be engaged. In closing, excuse me for going over, but I don't have competition. I would urge the city to go out and consider the program to get citizens involved, but they need to be informed. And the things you decide to do, with staff's input, you need to get that out to them so that they really understand what's coming down and the impact, especially in parks and rec. That one to me is appalling because the people in this town like those services. Little kids, okay? Or what was it, little dribblers?
Little dribblers.
Yeah, well, I'm a big dribbler and so I'm done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, anyone else wish to speak?
For the record, we did receive 5 written public comments that you all have copies of.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close the public comment. Matters before the council.
Mayor, we do have 3 more slides remaining that outline the next process. One outlining hopefully what we can begin to work on tonight, maybe even wrap up if we have time, is the restoration of items. And then I'll let Kelly go through the other 2, but they should be very
I just
quick.
didn't want people to have to wait any longer.
Sure.
I mean, I've been watching some people have been here, seems longer than I've been here.
We were going to suggest that before you look at restoring items, you take public comment in case there was anything that you
Thank you.
needed, so.
Kelly?
So did we want to go
The
through the
remaining
budget
3 slides.
restoration list?
Let's go through the remaining 3 slides and then we'll turn it over to the budget restoration exercise.
Okay. So there are a few items that require some more immediate input from the city council because of the time-sensitive nature in Parks and Recreation. These items have been advertised in the summer activity guide, and they'll be promoted up to the community in the month of May for summer activities. So we were hoping to get some more immediate input from the city council on these 4 items. Oh, we're not showing the items on screen here.
I think, Christina, could we display the PowerPoint again? It's okay.
There we go. Okay, so the 4 items: cancellation of the July 7th summer concert at a cost of $4,171 or a savings. Cancellation of the dive-in movie program, savings of $2,990. Reduction in the Doherty Valley Aquatic Center rec and lap swim hours, savings of $13,474. And a reduction in Camp Central extended care hours for $1,549.
Are you looking for comment?
Looking for council
I-
input on those 4 items
I-
because of the time-sensitive nature of it.
I would agree that canceling those 4 items would be prudent at this time. Compared to what other things we're looking at. I don't like any of them, but they look prudent under the circumstances.
And the reason why we're bringing them before council this evening is they already went out in the recreation guide, so we will have to do the notifications. There may still be people showing up for the events, although we'll do our best to make sure that the community is notified that those events are canceled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marisol, do you have something on the
Yeah, just really quick. I was just curious, how it, the Parks Commission kind of came up with the number that $1, increasing $1 in the synthetic and grass sports fields, an additional $1 increase.
That's
Rec
not
swim
part of
piece.
this.
No, I was, okay. Well,
We'll get
it's
to
saying,
that.
well, one second. So I guess what I'm just saying is like, if we're talking about reducing those hours for the lap swim, rec and lap swim, is there any way that if, say, we double just $2 or $3 instead of $1, would that help offset some of that? Like
have
having to do that?
I would say yes, if we raise the fees, then it
Okay.
would.
I think you got help coming, Cal.
Yeah.
And let me add to what she's saying, because the last time we did this, Kathy, you remember that a week later, somebody brought in a petition or something like that, and their council member caved, and next thing you know, we were refunding. So I mean, if we're gonna do this, we gotta do it.
Right. So the rec swim hour, it's $7 an hour will be this summer. We would be increasing that in January in order to have plenty of time to warn everybody on that one, that it would go to 8. It would bring us to the higher side of the Tri-Valley, but not the highest. So we would be the same as doubling at that point in time. And that would be for swimming. And for the field rental, we are highly subsidizing field rental. We made an 8-year agreement with the nonprofits for $1 a year, but the costs have far increased that. And so that is also why we would be increasing that by that $1 that happens in July per normal, and then $1 more in January.
Okay, but you're asking for a guidance on this, for the rec swim hours and lap swim hours. That's why I'm asking, would it be possible to reconsider maybe just a $2 increase instead of $1 increase? And if that can set off this, avoid this from happening and still make it available for people to have, access to the pools in the way they're accustomed to. And, that's important for a lot of reasons, for health, quality of life, a lot of things.
Absolutely something that can be considered.
Okay, because I would rather consider that than reducing it and cutting those services.
Would increasing it completely mitigate the $13,000?
$1 increase.
I'm trying to remember.
I was looking at the numbers by $1 increase was
Thank
for
you.
the swim fees is a $22,000 savings.
Mhm.
So if you add $1, you just added another 22,000.
That's assuming that the demand is inelastic.
it covers the 13,000 is the point.
So in that case, do we know what is the impact? If you think that it is not elastic, then if it is impacting good chunk of numbers, then increasing $2 from $1 should be helpful.
Yeah,
should
we
resolve
can,
it.
you can increase the rec swim fee to $8 this year, which would, it would start in July, which would increase your cost immediately, which would generate more revenue. That's what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
And it's possible, again, it will just take you to the highest spot in the Tri-Valley with Dublin.
Yeah, but water charges increased, so.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think it's gonna significantly, you know, people are gonna be like, oh my God, one more dollar. I don't think it's gonna really impact them like to that degree either. I think they would rather have the availability of the pool.
Absolutely.
Sounds good idea.
Yeah.
So if we have a council majority direction on this item, because we did need this time sensitive item, we are looking at canceling the summer concert, the Dive-In movie program, and reducing Camp Central, but increasing our pool fee by another $1 to save the third reduction. Is that a
Correct.
good?
Well, let me ask about the Camp Central extended hours. Care hours. Isn't that what helps to get, parents to be able to bring their kids there and participate in Camp Central? Or are we liable to reduce participation in Camp Central if we reduce those hours? It's not a big money thing.
We trimmed, so we just trimmed down the amount of time in the morning and the amount of time in the afternoon. So we would still have extended care. It just, rather than an hour and a half, you'd only have an hour before the program. And rather than an hour and a half in the evening, you'd only have an hour. Our statistically, as you looked at it, we kind of narrowed down to only 2 or 3 kids on either end on those 30 minutes. So that's why we trimmed it.
Okay, right.
So do we have a council majority for my previously stated? Okay, we'll make sure that we include those 3 items, but then increasing the pool fee by another $1 to retain those hours.
Beginning on
July 1st.
July 1st.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And at this point, Kelly will be bringing up the spreadsheet. I don't know if you want to go over the next steps or
No, we've already done next steps.
Sure. So we're going to switch to an Excel spreadsheet. Again, reminding the council, we have, Kelly, as you bring that up, I can provide a quick review here. We have 600,000 in available funding to restore. Now, if the council funds the infrastructure maintenance fund at the recommended critical need level of 700, that frees up another 800,000, so we can restore a total of 1.4 million. I also want to note that we did show the Doherty Valley CIP that has no funding associated with it at this point. So Doherty Valley tree replacement is not funded at this point. So please, I wanted to make sure to note that there wasn't any confusion that that 980 for Doherty Valley CIP was unfunded. What we did this evening is put together this spreadsheet, and Kelly can go through it. This is staff recommended restoration items. I don't know if you could see that clearly here, or if we need to increase it, but we can go through the list quickly, or we could take any council input. It depends on what your pleasure is, and we have about 45 minutes until the council meeting. I just wanted
Let's
to
start with the infrastructure
Maintenance.
maintenance fund, and I would go with the recommendation as stated.
So is that
I agree.
do we have
agree.
a
We'll-
council
We put
majority?
it at 1.5 million in the last couple of years, but
Right.
if the recommendation is to just go with the, approximately 800,000.
Sure.
I'd take it with that.
700,000.
700,000 funded, 800,000
800,000
unfunded.
saved.
Right.
So that would add to this restoration list, 800,000. So you'd have about 1.4 million to restore.
Right.
Okay.
And to
If
be clear-
you
oh.
consider that the PARS account has 1.8 million in it, as opposed to 1.6, that adds another 200,000.
Correct. So we could completely drain the PARs at 1.8, and that
Yes.
would again increase the restoration list from 1.4 to 1.6.
Correct.
Is that a direction that you want to go?
Yeah, let's
Yes.
put that 200K. So it doesn't matter when we are taking out from parts, it's like leaving
what
the
it's there for.
200Ks. Yeah.
If this isn't the situation, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And if we're 36.3% on the reserve, can we tap into 0.3%?
We can.
Or
I'm
more.
not exactly sure how much 0.3% is.
Well,
That's right. It was 600,000 for 1%. So yeah, about 200,000.
Okay.
So that would put us up to
1.8.
1.8.
I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I'd vote to go down to 16.
Well,
I mean, if you want to put it on the table now, or do you want to wait, see what else is there? Because I mean, the ones that I want to see brought back is the police officer, and I don't know what the position was in parks, but you said you're going to have one person overseeing all the sprinkler heads in the city.
I'm Maria.
I just worry that if you're talking about bringing a reserve down to 16%, yeah, that would cover.
Yeah, because
But
I
that's
didn't want to
obvious.
do 36.
But that's one-time money,
yes,
and we can't do that again next year.
no,
We need to.
So
Will be
that's
negative.
what gets me concerned about drawing down the reserve anymore.
So I think at this point, let's go with the IMF infrastructure. So let's see
the
those.
1.8 million and see what we can buy back with 1.8 and see how close we get to.
Okay.
At least
things we
not
want.
Defer.
So
maintenance.
does it make sense for me to run through this list pretty
Yeah,
quickly?
Yeah.
Or, and then you can add your
Well,
own
I-
if it's not
I
listed?
have my list of things.
Okay.
I suspect each of us does. And
Okay.
whereas you have probably 200 things on that list. Is that right?
We have about 50 or 60.
Yeah, we strategically went through and
Oh.
tried to identify items that
All
are big, either impacts to the public, or if you start at the top, there is restoration of training, employee recognition,
Yes.
recognizing that we did freeze 13 positions immediately. This budget represents another 15 or so positions frozen. That's going to put a lot of workload on the staff. One of the items that we have here is we did reduce the budget for employee recognition, but we also included enhancing it as well, to continue that and to improve morale. So we can go through, if you want to just look at these line by line and say yes or no, or start throwing out other suggestions. The 1.8, and that's again with 200,000 coming out of the general fund, correct? Somebody said 0.3%. That 1.8, depending on what the items are, can go away very quickly.
So just to make sure I understand, so this is all 1.4 million that you're going to
No,
present?
the total of this chart, you don't have to scroll to the bottom, Kelly, but it was over 2 million in restoration. We're just putting the items in here as a starting point, and then whatever else council wants to throw out as a suggestion, we'll add that to the bottom as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Good. Quick question.
Okay, the things that interest me the most are ones that have significant public base to it, significant participation. There are 3 classes that were listed. The police department, one of the Citizens Police Academy, or what do we call that? The Government 101 and the Planning Academy. Those 3 I would like to see restored. The youth programs in the police department, I would like to see restored. The 3rd grade tour, I would like to see restored. Those are all very public facing things. And I would like to see a large fraction of the library hours. Now, whether it's all 22 or not, it's certainly a large fraction of those library hours.
And Vice Mayor Perkins, with the library hours, they offer them in tiers, so we would have to get
Yes.
you the tier 1 and tier 2 costs.
Yes.
If we
I'm
if we
aware
have
that
them.
it's hard to buy 1 hour or 2 hours. You buy in blocks. And I recognize that. I'm not quite sure how that gets restored, but eliminating all 22 hours of our subsidy at 380,000. I would ask that we restore some of those, whatever the tiers are in the library.
Brad, do you have the numbers for that? If you could, for the tiers? Or
And then
Kathy?
the
Brad raised his
the-
hand first.
those outward facing community engagements, the 3 classes, the youth programs and the 3rd grade tours was the 4 things that I wanted to see restored.
So
And
was it the Citizens Academy, was it planned to reduce from 2 to 1 session?
yes, yes,
But we want to continue with the 2 sessions, you're saying?
yes, we fill that, you know,
Okay.
a dozen years ago, we went from 1 to 2, and because they always had a large waiting list for that. And so, that was on the order of $20,000 or $25,000 is my recollection for that, chief. Is that? Now, that was 10 years ago. I don't know what it costs you to do Assistance Police Academy is.
On our production level, it's 10,000 per class. And then the, 9,000 community program, 10,100 for the youth program.
So the combined is 20,000 for your youth programs and your other Citizens Police Academy. That's a fairly modest, but yet I think it's a public facing program that deserves retention. Lauren, do you know any idea how much your planning academy costs? It's what, 6 classes? Oh. Okay. And the government 101. About 15,000. Okay.
And 3rd grade tours? Combined 15? Okay.
Well, what's on the table right now is suggestion to bring back the 3rd grade tours and some other things. I mean, pick one at a time. What he's looking at nodding heads.
Yeah.
I mean, I want the 3rd grade tour. I'd be a little on the others, on the library hours. I'd hate to be pouring money into library hours when the police department's asking for an investigator and the other thing I told you about in parks.
What I've asked for is 50,000 in those front facing activities. When you say 15, 15 and 20, that's 50,000 out of the 1.8 million. So there is still wiggle room to add an officer, to add a building attendant, or wherever those things are.
Well, I took us off subject. Shadar, how do you feel about his suggestion? Because
Oh,
Scott
no.
put something on the table.
So
That block right there, Kelly, that is the amount to restore is 50,000 for all of that.
Yeah, this,
line 60.
the keypad is not putting
50,000.
anything in, so I'm trying to figure out, it seems to be locked. I don't know if the number lock is not.
I'm sorry,
working.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, so for the community face programs, definitely we want those. One thing I want to check on the same thing on community facing one is I saw about the app. So when community is able to submit a ticket, they are using CRM tickets, right? So CRM, right? So are we eliminating the mobile app or?
I don't believe the mobile app is being supported at the moment. Christine, I don't know if you had any, yeah, it is not being supported. We're trying to get it actually removed from the App Store because the CRM system no longer consistently interfaces with it. So that was part of the CRM upgrade that was on the the cut list is looking at a system that is more mobile friendly. So right now, users have to go onto their
PC.
browser.
Browsers and do it.
That was a cost of 38,000 for the
Yeah.
CRM program.
Yeah, but yeah, so anyway, right now we are not able to use that app, you are saying. Because I
It's,
remember submitting ticket from using that app.
yeah, it's
Lately?
spotty at best.
Not lately, maybe.
I believe the program also is being phased out by the company.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
we need
okay.
a new program altogether.
Okay.
Yeah, it's no longer supported by the company.
Supported.
My understanding is that you can still submit things online. The mobile app does not work. You'd have to purchase a new system, a new CRM program in order to get that functionality on a mobile app.
See, the advantage with mobile is you're walking there and you see a pothole or something broken, they just take the picture and they just upload it. So that's a advantage of having a mobile app compared to PC. In PC, I had to go back home and then people forget about it. Like,
Yes, they stopped supporting it and we've been working with them. That was part of the reason why we were looking at the new CRMs.
okay.
The police chief, can you go back up to the police and how much an individual officer? Yeah, okay, 270,000, 300,000. Firearms replacements, okay. Well,
So that itself 950K.
oof, well, we don't have.
Line 33 is for sure, we want to have it. Firearms replacement. We don't want malfunction firearms.
No.
Definitely.
Can you
not a
put that
good-
on the new store?
Okay,
45,000?
I saw 3 nodding heads
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
firearm replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I tried to stay with to begin with Scott's suggestion about the classes. Where are we with that?
Yeah, they're back on the list at
There-
50,000.
We did add, yeah, there was a placeholder for the classes that were mentioned at 50,000.
Okay.
So we're adding that towards the end. We're getting information on the library hour restoration. If Kathy wants to mention those numbers really quick.
I can, and Brad's right here. So he's the expert truly. If we added 6 additional hours back to the San Ramon Main Library and 6 additional hours at the Doherty Station Library, that would cost about 170,000. So that's a fairly modest increase. The next level up you could go is 12 additional hours at either library, and that increases or up to 16 additional hours. The county has a very specific schedule and you can't change it. It is what it is. But you could decide to fund.
I'm sorry, what was the second one? The first one was 6 and 6
Yes,
for a total of 12.
yes, would be 170.
170, okay. And the next,
The next level up from that, you could add 12 additional hours at one of the libraries and 6 at the other. It comes out to different dollar amounts depending on how you slice and dice it. So for example, if you added 12 additional hours to the main library, that's 243,000. You could do that. And then 6 to the Doherty Station would be 62 additional thousand. So
that'd be 300. Well, that's almost the entire
mhm.
Same
381.
as, again, back to the same.
It's because the hours are more expensive at the main library. It's a larger library and it requires more staff to operate than the Doherty Station Library. So the numbers are different. It's not like it's an
Okay.
hourly rate that's straight across, just to add more confusion to the conversation.
Uh,
So it's
I
cheaper.
think it
to-
actually makes it easier. To me, this is why I would support it. I mean, we're going to go out and ask people for a measure of some kind. I don't know what it is yet. I mean, we got to solve a problem with that money that's going to be coming in. This is going to be one of those things. If you want these extra hours or some of these things that people see are cut, I mean, I think that's a good thing. I mean, you heard the one public comment we had. If you've got a reason why you're doing it, I mean, people will side with you.
Well, I would propose that we do the 6 and 6
Yeah,
at a minimum.
that's,
That's 170K, a minimum of 6 and 6. So that's
So do we?
1 hour a day for 6 days. Is that what that pretty much is? Is that the way it works?
The
I know
schedules
that
don't
they,
get it. It's taking you down from 22 additional hours. That would give you 12. So you'd be reducing 10 hours of service for libraries. And
yes.
Well, if I can add on this, one of the key things to this is when you go with 6 additional hours, you lose one of those days. So with 6, so right, So at 46 hours at each library, you are a Tuesday through Saturday operation.
Oh.
The reason why the big increase when you go to 12 hours is because you add another day back in of Monday. So
Okay.
the normal county operation is 40 hours, which is a Tuesday through Saturday operation.
Okay.
By getting 6, you gain a couple more hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. You don't get a full day. So it's not,
Oh,
and it's very structured. 40 hours, you get X
Okay.
on each day.
Right.
46 hours, you get a certain number on each day, which is set countywide
Got it. Got it.
at,
So they
Um,
find that adding hours on a Friday and a Saturday doesn't make a lot of sense, but it does make sense on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is what you're saying.
correct, because those are their larger days. And
Those
then
are
if
the
you look at the schedule on a Friday, Saturday, those are the least
we
amount
would
of
be
numbers
closed
on
on-
a day per library.
We'd be closed on Sundays and Mondays.
Correct, which is currently where Doherty's at. And then San Ramon, if you went to the 6 additional at San Ramon, it would be a Tuesday through Saturday
No,
operation.
that's what I
as well.
propose.
So
we recommend
currently the Doherty Valley is closed on Monday?
Currently, the current operations, the Doherty Valley Library is closed on Mondays. and
Mondays,
it is
okay.
a Tuesday through Saturday operation at 46 hours. County provides 40, we provide the 6 additional hours.
So that
And then
additional
San
6
Ramon
hours
is
is perfect
different.
for Doherty then.
Well, what
And
we
Output
would,
San-
we would restore Doherty back to its current schedule.
Yeah.
And we would be cutting the main library back to 46.
Correct. If you're gonna
Okay.
go 6 and 6,
I-
they both Doherty and San
Going
Ramon
to
would
be
have the
running a
same
46-hour
operational
schedule.
hours, which would be a Tuesday through Saturday.
I think that's a good way to go. And I think it gives the
Yeah.
message that we can't afford it all.
I think you
So-
just need to shut it
I-
with the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, San Ramon loves their libraries, but that's $330,000. And I would go with the staff recommendation on this. And
It's 380,000 is the savings, and I would like to restore 170 of it, leaving 210,000 reduction.
Of course, I know that the hours that you have taken into consideration what those peak hours of use are, of course, right? Do you think that those additional hours, that would be added would, provide a substantial amount of additional accommodation for a substantial amount of residents
I'm
Based-
sorry.
based on existing traffic use, times
Well, I
of
mean, the
day?
county's established that 40-hour, 46-hour, 52-hour, 56-hour, those are their levels of services. So the
Right.
county's at 40, and then you can buy in on the 6, 12, or 16 hours of services. And they've set those hours countywide, so there's consistency throughout all the libraries. And they've determined when those are the peak hours. So for example, I don't want to get too far into this because this could be, I'm sorry. So,
No, no, no.
yeah.
No
so
apologies.
they've established those hours that they would think be most beneficial, not only for the community, but it's also staffing because they have to staff those hours.
Right.
So
I
that's
said
why it's
go-
not kind
go
of
the
like an
county
à la carte.
standard 40 hours.
Now, by the way, the county funds what, 30? We're gonna subsidize some of it.
The county
That's it.
funds 40 hours.
Oh, they fund 40
They
hours now.
fund
They used to
40
get-
hours of library services a week is the standard county level of service for every county library.
Okay,
So we are adding 6 + 6.
well, that was my suggestion.
That's a
but-
suggestion.
but I don't see concurrence there.
Yeah.
Right, so
I'm
the-
good with that plan.
And I was going to ask about the contract person in Martin's office, how to get that back.
Well, let's stay on the library for a
Yeah,
moment.
you're right.
Yeah, let's.
Until we settle that issue. Is it,
One by one, yeah.
So we would be looking for a direction from the council majority. So if we have 3 council members that would like to restore 170,000, we will do that. If not, we will leave that as a $380,000 cut. So
I'm going with that option, 6 + 6 hours.
I would like to see the 6 + 6, but that's still a 10-hour cut.
do we have one more?
I
or-
agree with the 6 + 6. We're still making some, taking into consideration the need, but also understanding we don't have the money. So
Kelly, could you add the 170 then to the amount to restore?
Okay.
You know,
So-
as an exercise, we can also go through, because I believe each department, one of the common themes that they had was restoring training and employee
Yes.
appreciation. If you want to, council, as an exercise, we can go through and restore those items and see where we're at the 1.8. Kelly, if you want to go through the sheet and just add back in the any training or appreciation items.
I agree with that. I think training is super important. And last thing we want to do, even in lean times, is to cut employee training and especially recognition. Morale is going to be an important thing as times get harder and harder. We
So does
need to
that-
keep the great staff that we've got.
2 and 3, or
That's items 2, 3, 6, and 7.
And
This legislation's changing.
that is for all the departments, right? Just to
No,
make
this is
sure.
Just general government.
Just general government.
We're gonna go through each department and restore that just to see.
What it
Okay,
does to the
yeah.
bottom line. And 6 and 7.
I don't.
Oh, we don't need to.
I don't know that we necessarily need to restore council, staff conferences, regional meetings. I was
Well,
more talking
does,
about.
what got, you see, what is the budget without this restoration? Do we still go to mayor's conference? Do we still go to Cal Cities?
Yeah, Scott has the details on the categories. I know it did
You
reduce.
just can't fly anymore. You have to drive.
Right.
You were chastising me for bringing up stuff now.
So Scott has the detail on that line item.
So the short version is no conferences, so no League of Cities. It alternates north and south every year, so that's out. We've reduced the number of regional meetings, so like Cal Cities, East Bay, those are all gone. And then we've limited, and I'd have to do the percentage, but it's in the neighborhood of like 25 or 30% reduction in all of the other, there's like a miscellaneous bucket which captures meetings that aren't categorized like the mayor's conference.
Well, okay, we need to restore a bunch of that. As a mayor's conference appointee, I'm expected to report on what's happened as the mayor, and ultimately other council members would be part of that. So the mayor's conference,
Tri-Valley City,
the what?
Tri-Valley City
Yeah, the
Council.
Tri-Valley City Council.
Council, that's
The
Um,
PVC
PVC.
legislation.
Yes, and the East Bay Division meetings should be restored. I don't know how much of that it is. Maybe we don't go to the convention in Long Beach, but
Mhm.
if we cut out the convention in Long Beach, that makes sense. I don't have a big problem with that. But the mayor going to the US Conference of Mayors, that's important. The other 4 mayors are going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
did not touch that. That's not in.
Okay,
here.
that's not in there. So restore the mayor's conference, the East Bay Division, and the TVTC, or the Tri-Valley Council.
okay.
So that's about what, half of that, I expect.
Well, we could also leave that in as the full amount, and then when we refine the budget, if there's any other wiggle room, we can make suggestions at the
Right.
final budget adoption. But just for the exercise purposes, if we
Right,
go
let's move
through.
on down then.
Yeah.
Education and training, 600,
line 18,
line 18.
line 18.
Did you get the other?
Just for the record, this is the worst keyboard and mouse I've ever used.
Yeah, it's one of those spill-proof keyboards, so it's very squishy.
Okay,
Kelly, did you get the employee recognition?
he did.
No, the other.
Not the enhanced, but. the
What is that
restored value.
enhanced is?
So our employee recognition budget has been pretty flat for the last, I don't know, 5-10 years. So that's our annual events for employees, employee barbecue, our recognition programs. We really pared them back after the economic downturn in 2009 and never restored them. So that was recognizing that, morale will probably take a few hits with all of the extra work that we would, hold a few more appreciation events.
Okay,
Okay, yep.
let's put the 26 back in, see where it takes us.
Oh, no, not the 26, right? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, 26,
put-
line 11, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Put that on.
There is a little bit up.
I don't
Line
think we skipped any.
20, Department Planning Commission conferences. Is
Planning
that,
Line
Commission
22?
conferences.
is that considered as part of the training or?
Well, then the Planning Commissioners Academy would be out if the league convention is out, but so that's what, half of that?
Yeah, so you could put in
Half.
11K.
11.
That's citywide coffee tea.
Training and employee development in the police department.
What do you got, lines 31 and 32?
Both, yeah. 56. Both combined 50 plus 56. Oh, no, it's 6,500.
Right there. There we go.
And on the, since we're there, the firearms replacement, I mean, you said 4 or 5, 6 years. I mean, I know of weapons that are still pretty functional from World War I, World War II. I don't, but we don't want to put our officers in danger, but I don't know that that's a critical savings personally.
1,000%. When we did this exercise, we were looking at a total of 900,000-ish. That was one of the things that, hey, if there was 900,000, we could get that in there. But for our priority, training is an absolute priority, but in personnel, we have trained armors that can make that last. That, again, if it's the council's direction, that's what we'll do, but our priority is to keep that.
Do that one divided by 2, does that help still?
What's that?
Divided by 2?
Firearm replacement.
I would just take it out.
Okay, let's go with divide by 2.
Them that replace parts of something breaks, we can make it through. Again, this was in the proposed budget, and if you looked at the staff report, it was in our tier 1.
Okay.
Reduction.
So
So by 2, oh, you
Yeah.
want to do by 2, right?
I took firearm replacement out, correct?
No.
No.
He's saying a year.
Divide by 2.
Divide by 2.
So
Okay.
you can divide it by.
The chief is recommending just take it out for
Take it
this year.
out.
We
He's
can-
saying a year wouldn't make a
Right.
difference is what he
So-
said.
People, yeah,
Exactly.
I'd rather,
Okay.
same here.
all right.
Numbers 7 and 8.
Oh, safety, that's the top.
Safety and training.
6, 7, and 8. Okay.
And that looks like all the
Verse
training and
54.
education to me.
Line 54.
Line 54.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry.
And I think we talked about line 4, right, earlier,
Oh,
about raising it by $1.
Yeah.
So
But
that,
that-
restore that,
If
please.
you raise it by $1, then the revenue would cover,
Yeah, we'd add an additional, that would be $2 increase instead
Sure.
of 1.
yes. So
Mhm.
we don't need to restore that. That'll be restored through a fee increase.
okay.
So it's
Okay.
Zero
Roll.
effect, pretty much.
So keep going, Kelly. Let's see.
That's the end.
That's the
okay.
end.
What's
So
the
So
bottom
there-
line now?
So we
We're
are
on
now
column
at,
E.
Okay, we restored. It's a little more, a little under 500,000. And we've got
Keep
1.3, got 1.3 left. So
Around 1.3.
restoring some officers and some other staff makes some sense here.
I'd kind of like to know from the chief, if you had to put one more officer in, if we could restore one officer, is it community resource? Is it traffic? Is it you know, what, is there a preference? They're all important.
The option is only one. I go to school resource officer, to be honest.
I was thinking of two,
Only one.
Yeah.
But
we've got enough money to do two.
You know, the problem is next year, how we are going to do it. Getting more people is dangerous.
Three officers. Be like,
We're gonna get rid of it. But if we don't take all the 1.8 million, then we'll be all right. So
Yeah.
Then
my recommendation is take two.
let's take two.
That's number one and number three is that's.
Which two?
Which two would you recommend?
officers there. Again, I would have 1 through 6 as officers if it was the option. Because that's what's needed. 1, 2 would be in order of preference.
Okay.
On the officer level.
All right.
Okay. Now what's the bottom line look like? 1 million.
Million. We got
800K still.
800,000 to
So
go.
there's 600 to 800 million, 600 to 800,000 left.
Let's,
So in the parks and community services, what are those small things that we were talking about, dribble and all those things, right? So
Well, there was some staff who ran the reduced hours, closed community center.
what is the reduce little dribbles program? And one question regarding this 50%, right? That contract with the tennis contract. What we are doing right now? What is the percentage? Oh, 60-40, so it will be.
Store frozen office tech.
What about the Monday senior
And the
van
Monday,
service?
Van.
The van service?
I think, I'd like to put that back in.
Yeah, I'd like to put that back in, please.
And one tech.
On PD.
This?
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question where we get too far away from it. You had something, a request for somebody writing the contracts or looking over the contracts? Where is that in there? You don't get the contracts right, that's gonna cost us more money, we say.
That is correct. That is in the city attorney's budget. We had a contract coordinator and actually lost her to the police department when she transferred over there.
That's okay, wouldn't take it back. She's not coming back. She got that badge, she looked pretty happy.
We did interview some candidates and we're not able to fill the position. And we're going to go out again when the budget difficulties hit. In order to put the contract coordinator back in, it's about $192,000 position. However, that would be offset because we are paying staff about $42,000 in overtime to cover some of what the contract coordinator is doing. So the net would be about $150,000.
We got it?
And Mayor and Council, can I also suggest if now we're looking at positions, if you're interested in restoring that position for 150, let's go through all the departments and see if there's any other highlighted positions as well. Making sure, I don't know how many public services included on this particular list, but I don't think we talked about that just yet. So Kelly, is that the pleasure of the council, the contract coordinator position? At 150K.
Just
Add
one
that
of
in
us. So
now.
far.
Is that, do I have direction from the council for that one or?
Sorry, which one is that?
It's not on there.
Contract coordinator in the attorney's office at 150. Do we put that in here?
We would put it in at 192 because the offset would be somewhere else.
Okay.
What's the bottom line look like?
We're at 1.1.
1.1 and this one would be 192 for the contract coordinator.
It'll put us at 1.3.
So that would be 1.3. And I would again suggest that we look at other positions if we're focusing on positions now. Just to make sure that we're
Is that the-
reviewing all of
Is that the
them.
most important next position? That's the question.
There is a fund, a Building and Safety Services Office Specialist in Community Development at 184, and an Associate Planner for Housing at 208.
And if you scroll down to, I believe there's.
We've done police, public works, reclassify a parks specialist to parks coordinator for 12,000, a parks coordinator for 207,000, transportation associate planner, 167.
How about the number 5? Are we eliminating all those services or are we reducing those services?
Reducing janitorial services by 280,000.
I don't know. I kind of feel like I would like to reinstate that. I think it's important. That's important. Half of it.
So half of this,
Yes, please.
okay?
I think Maria has a comment about that.
She's
I
back.
want to say my piece. No, I mean, we have this, it's not up here anymore. Our priority is also staffing as well. With regards to janitorial, we can offset that by staffing, but then it's kind of that balance between having the staffing available and cutting some of these services. So if we were to reinstate, I'm gonna.
Kelly, do you want to
Oh, it
scroll
says
down?
general, okay, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we,
Not part of general government. That's just.
Yes.
Kelly, do you want to
Ahead
scroll
of it,
down really
that's
quick?
just
it's
follows
just,
us around.
yeah.
Yeah, Kelly's going to scroll down really quick while
No,
we're-
it's right here. I mean,
Oh,
our
right,
top,
that's
our,
it.
the 3 positions are really important to fill because we really feel that
Mm-hmm.
gap, especially if we're going to be reducing a lot of these contracts that we have.
And in general, when we talk positions, that is services to the community. You know, we had a comment earlier, hey, you just need to cut people, but that is services that we will be reducing. So every position that we restore, I think is the most impact that you will see to services to the community. So I think what we're suggesting is rather than cutting or restoring the janitorial services, we would look at 1 or 2 of the positions.
So the first position, the reclassify, is because we don't have a position that we can fill at this time. By reclassifying a specialist, the coordinator can coordinate the team. The parks coordinator is a position that we actually don't have, and with the increase of the work that's coming along. And then transportation associate planner, we actually lost 2 positions in transportation. So this is Darlene's position, working with all the regional TDM, 511 Contra Costa. So those were those 3 positions.
She does the SWAT budget.
Well, let's see, doing line 1 is easy, 12,000.
I'd go with that. I'd go with the 1 and 2.
Yes, I agree. And take the janitorial services up
Right.
back out.
So Kelly, could you, did you have something?
No.
Okay.
Bring it back.
Okay, you're right there.
Okay.
So Kelly, if you could take out that janitorial services at the 140 and then restore lines 1 and 2.
Oh, I thought they wanted to leave it.
Yeah,
Be-
so
Maria was saying that we don't have the staff for that, for the janitorial services either,
Oh,
right?
right, well, staff would be covering those items. So restoring staff helps restore janitorial services.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So it's a little bit in order. So Kelly, just so we're refreshed, could we scroll to the bottom and see where we're at on that one?
Mhm.
Keep going, yeah.
1.3.
Well, that still gives us up to 400,000 if we wanted it.
And that's with reducing the general fund by 0.3%.
Right.
Yes.
I forget how we got to that number, but
It,
yeah,
On
we
what,
got to it by, you started
Right.
it with 600,000 and then we only do 700,000 of IMF.
right.
We take 1.6 out of, or excuse me, 1.8
Sure.
out of PARS instead of 1.6 out of PARS.
Right.
And,
0.3 was general fund,
yeah.
Reserve.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's how you get to 1.8.
right?
So
So-
If you,
still think we look at personnel for parks and community development, and we haven't looked at them yet.
Yeah, we haven't. looked
For
at park yet.
community development, we have the Building and Safety Services Office Specialist and also a Program Planner, Associate Planner for housing.
And then we had parks. Did we look at parks as well?
Parks, I think we,
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
been restored.
Stored one,
Yeah.
okay.
Was that it for staff?
that was it for staff in Public Works, I mean, in Parks and Community Services.
Yeah.
Any department that we did for any.
Is there a department? that we
Community
haven't-
development, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
Whoops.
Whoop, too far. There it is. Okay. Scroll just a little bit. There we go.
What about?
Lauren, which one makes the most sense?
How we can get our permit done fast. So which position is that, like line two?
And you're going to be discussing fees again tonight, probably. And they are funded by the fees, where people are paying fees for certain buildings.
We have enough to restore both of them.
The line two,
So your preference is line two?
okay,
Line two.
Line two.
and then declare victory and
Declare victory.
then declare victory. 1.5.
One
Yep,
point five, 300,000 left.
So we have
Okay.
enough for the housing
yep.
if we want.
There,
Yeah.
yeah,
Little things that really make a difference.
I know that there's one.
The housing.
Commission's teachers, like
The contract coordinator wasn't.
Like office supplies.
For commission,
Yeah, line
there is
three.
$1,000 for commission. Not in this spreadsheet, but within this list, I saw that. What is that, for commissioners?
I-
T-shirts.
I think there's one on here that I thought we weren't gonna have, that hazardous tree removal replacements. It's 100% reduction. It's $15,000. But I would say anything that is a hazard or potential safety or significant sanitation issue, we ought to look at addressing.
Yeah.
Was that under Public
Well,
Works?
I had it as a tier one cut for
Public services.
public services.
after we take a hazardous tree out, we just won't replace it.
So that's, oh, so it's a replacement, not taking out the hazard.
You will take out the hazard.
Okay, you'll take out the hazard. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
Disregard.
right.
Disregard.
The other, we did have personnel rules and regulations update for 50K. I don't know if that's in the list or not.
Yes, it is.
It is. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Restore number one.
We could do that at about 50K, Scott, or do we need the? Yeah.
Put them back in.
Yep.
And now let's see what the bottom line is.
1.6, you
leave
got
it there.
200,000 left.
Okay, one item that is like, staff and commission clothing allowance, 1,385. So
Where was that?
that is not in the list, but it's here.
What is it?
Packet page 27, which says staff and commission clothing allowance, 1,385.
Is
No
that
new
the
staff
Community
t-shirts,
Services,
sweatshirts.
Parks and Community Services?
It is under Parks and Community Services, yes.
Okay, so
Community services, $1,000.
Yeah.
$1,000.
1,385.
Well, give it 1,000.
1,000, yeah. that's right.
okay,
Where are we at? It's 1,000,006.
yeah, still have
Yeah,
200,000.
Okay.
All right.
And that's without the contract coordinator position.
Okay, declare victory.
I think so. It's good to leave a little leeway.
The contract coordinator is not in yet. Does that,
What's that?
did you want the contract coordinator in? It is not included.
Oh, I thought we-
What's it do?
If,
to-
if
what's
That
the-
would take
we
the
waited
remainder
till
essentially.
mid-year or sometime after July 1, it wouldn't cost the full ride, right?
Right. We could wait until mid-year. The other one that I was withholding on mentioning, and maybe that's another mid-year, was the grants manager position that we did not fund. That one could actually potentially generate revenue. But you know, I'm also a little reluctant to add too much staff back to the pot at this point.
Right.
Not realizing you know, what it's
Was
going to
it-
look like next year.
Right. I think it's a good idea to just leave it where it's at and leave us just a little bit of cushion in case something that doesn't-
We will come back at mid-year. You know, if we don't fully expend our budget this year, there will be, you know, money to consider. Also, you know, some cities in very tight budget situations, we could do a check-in in September.
Yes.
You know, this is our adopted budget that we're required by law to adopt by the end of June. We can always come back to the council with another budget update if the situation changes. But I do appreciate the work of council this evening. It looks like a pretty solid list. We still have more discussion at our next meeting where we present the budget to council, but I think we're there. If that's agreeable by the council. Yeah.
I think we're good. Are we good? Everybody?
We're good, huh?
Thank
So
you.
what's the
Thanks.
next item,
Thanks,
Christina?
everyone.
Thank
I
you,
do-
Thank you
everyone.
very much for all your hard work in
Thank you,
getting
everybody.
this.
Okay, we'll
Appreciate it.
adjourn the special meeting.